this, Warren, we'll just focus on hosting.
Is that your host voice, Al?
That's my host voice. And here we are, and we're back. Thank you so much for tuning in again to Splice Splatter, the
film podcast presented by the Jean Cocteau Cinema in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where classic horror
meets modern gore.
Are we recording? Is this going?
We're going.
Oh, great.
This is it, baby.
This is it. We're in the deep end now.
Yeah, welcome back. Sorry, we are riding off caffeine and a dream over here.
Yeah,
so
that's as we usually are. And that's where our best and worst work comes from.
Yes, yeah, both simultaneously.
It's the best of times, it's the worst of times. Yeah.
and you are here with us.
So we are.
Before we get into things, we wanted to give a little shout for those that are local to Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Yeah, we love our locals.
Yes. So we are at the Jean Cocteau Cinema on February 9th, 10th, and 14th. We will be playing Misery for Valentine's Day.
And guess whose programming idea that was?
Definitely not ours. We definitely did not do an episode on Misery.
I forgot to tell you this, and I'm glad that I did because now I can reveal it to you on the podcast. I went into Video Library the other day, and Lisa and I often talk about what we're playing at the theater.
Yeah.
And she was like, Siena, is Al okay? Did Al and her partner break up? Because these are some very sad choices for Valentine's.
No, Lisa. Mama Lisa.
Everybody, Al and Travis are fine.
Yeah, we're good. I'm just a very dark individual. Thanks.
I was like, Lisa, that was my idea too.
I actually kind of love that because that's the vibe I'm going for. I don't want to be like...
We're not going for cute Valentine's Day.
We have Princess Bride, but I have to admit to the internet, sorry, not sorry, I have never seen it, so...
I'm still shocked
Misery is naturally my...
shocked.
Collective gasp around the room, around the world, because every time I bring that up, people... But that's not for me. You know what's for me? Misery.
So if you want a miserable Valentine.
Yeah, if you want a miserable Valentine's, like myself,
like us.
The 9th, 10th, and the 14th at the Jean Cocteau Cinema. Tickets on sale now, so you can get those. And then there's some nice little goodies in there too. We have a pairing with cashmere and chocolate with, so they're going to have little heart chocolates with charcuterie, and I'm very excited about it.
It's so cute. I think some of them, we're not sure, but some of them might be anatomically correct hearts.
Because of course.
Because for Misery, it has to be, right? Anyway, so there's your Valentine's plans for you. You know what we're going to be doing.
Moving on for those not in the area. Do you have a tidbit today?
Oh, of course I have a tidbit.
I have a tidbit for later.
Ooh, a late tidbit?
It's going to come like when you're talking about your film, which we should tell people that what we're doing today.
Oh yeah, what are we talking about? Or do you want your tidbit first? Or
yeah, tidbit first. Okay. And then,
Well, I guess my tidbit is related to the movie. I don't know what I'm doing. That will clarify what we're talking about. I'm talking about the 1960 French film Eyes Without a Face, directed by Georges Franju. We're going to have a lot of Siena's old college French classes coming out today.
Woo-hoo.
We're going to see how I do.
Yeah,
it's
good
going
luck.
to be fun. So unlike last episode's film, this one was not explicitly censored when it was released, but it did have very intense audience reactions, particularly.
I imagine.
Right? I mean, like, I'll ask you how you reacted to it later, but at the 1960 Edinburgh Film Festival in Scotland, 7 different audience members fainted.
Yeah, I see that.
And Georges Franju responded by saying, well, now I know why Scotsmen wear skirts.
My guy.
I know.
Wow, the battle of the Scots and the French.
Yep.
A tale as old as time? I don't know.
Deep as a kilt, I guess.
Oh, no. I love my Scots, and I love France. So get it together.
Scots, love our skirts, love our Scotsmen and skirts.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
Which also kind of like reminded me a little bit of the reactions to the angiography scene in The Exorcist. I feel like these two films, there's like some interesting, again, medical horror. It hits deep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which honestly, I feel like House of Wax kind of hits on the same thing in some ways, since there's a crazed doctor.
Yes.
But anyway, you're talking about House of Wax.
2005 House of Wax, starring a bunch of just 2000s icons.
The most 2000s cast.
Yeah.
I didn't know that fucking Padalecki was in this movie.
Yeah,
I was
Jared
not expecting that.
Padalecki.
Yeah.
Such a baby.
He's
such
so
a
young.
cutie.
when all of the like facial hair gets ripped off, I was like, is he 12?
I know.
Like
everyone's very young in
everyone's
this.
Paris Hilton is so young.
I
in
know.
this. She's a baby.
I know. I love this movie. I remember when it came out. I don't think I want to say I don't think I saw it in theaters because I don't know if I was old
It
enough
seems like
to
you
see
would have been
in
young
theaters.
because it's 2005.
2005.
Right?
So it was, I was a sophomore.
Yeah.
In high school.
That seems pushing it.
So I don't think I was
yeah.
probably allowed, but I definitely rented it afterwards.
Was this like a blockbuster early 2000s rental for you?
I think it was an immediate, buy,
Oh.
not even a rental. I
Yeah.
think. So, which we'll get
love
into.
that.
Like that was kind of where it made its money. But
That makes sense.
You've never seen it before?
I've never seen it before. I think I hinted at this on last episode, but I feel about waxworks the way many people feel about clowns. Like they just
love them.
love
Love them. Like myself.
I do love them. I also part of what I did in prepping for this episode was I sat down with myself and I was like, Sienna, why are you so scared of waxworks? And so we're going to be unpacking that a little bit.
It's like an uncanny valley thing.
Uncanny, you say.
Uncanny. I was like, Sienna's going to have all the film theory here.
I do. It's actually technically this week it's psychoanalytic theory.
Ooh.
So we're getting into some Sigmund Freud today, baby.
Sigmund Freud.
Some Sigmund Freud, my fave, my problematic fave.
Man.
So yeah, I had a time and a half watching this last night. I was telling you before we started the recording, I get HelloFresh delivered, and so I'd like made myself this gorgeous like mushroom and Swiss burger, and I know the worst.
You really were like
possible
meat
choice.
and textural issues.
Yeah. And so I sat down and I was like, okay, I know most people, you always say don't eat your dinner while you're watching a horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I'm a horror fan. I'll be fine.
I'm fine.
Also, like, I'm sure nothing will happen in the first 20 minutes. Like, if I finish in the first 20 minutes,
I'm good.
I'll be fine.
Oh boy.
And then I got to the roadkill pile.
Oh,
and I was like, I did what, Sienna? You did what? And I was like, I've committed to this. I'm going to have to finish it. I couldn't do it. I had to actually turn the movie off to finish my dinner, which has never happened to me before.
It was more brutal than people give it. I think people like to shit on this for a lot of reasons, but there's moments.
It got me, man. This one got me.
Yay. I love that.
Got me
that makes me
really
really happy. To be fair, I watched Eyes Without a Face while eating spanakopita. So I don't know who I thought I was, but it's my favorite food, to be fair. But the one scene, I feel like there's a very
in Eyes Without a Face.
Yeah,
there's the one.
And
scene.
I was like, oh no. I don't know if I can eat this.
You were having your spanakopita.
Yeah, I was like, ooh, the phyllo dough's peeling in a way that the skin
no,
feels, and I was just like,
no.
I don't know if I made a good choice
we
here.
both made really
we were on the same
worst
page.
possible choices for like. I feel like you would have been fine with a hamburger, and I would have been fine with spanakopita potentially.
Don't eat meat, but probably would have been better
than.
Could have made it through.
Yeah,
I could have done the roadkill burger.
Yeah.
So
now that we've discussed it, all of you.
Yeah. Now that we're on this train.
Al, did we introduce ourselves? We introduced the podcast. I don't think we introduced ourselves.
I mean, I'm Al.
I'm Sienna.
We're your hosts. Welcome
you probably
back.
know us by now.
We're getting too comfortable. That's really what it is. We're
that's a dangerous thing. Don't let us get too comfortable.
Keep us in check, please.
Keep us on our toes.
So I'm going first today with House of Wax.
Thank God.
Which will be fun because I feel like mine's a little bit lighter, and then we can go into as light as you can get, and we can go into your wonderful wonder. I feel like it'll be a nice tee up to kind of leading into the film theory of everything.
They're also much more. Again, neither of us had watched the other's film beforehand, and again, really in conversation. These two, like there's
very much so.
They'd be great as a double feature pairing.
Yes,
I think.
Yeah. Oof. Yeah. If you have the stomach.
If you have the stomach. Although, question: which would you play first?
Ooh.
If you were programming them back to back.
Programming them. Let me think on that. Which one would you do first as I sit here and ponder?
I almost feel like I would want to do Eyes first so that you end on like the lighthearted romp.
Yeah.
I think because like Eyes, the ending of Eyes Without a Face makes me really sad. Like
Yeah.
it's
beautiful.
it's a gorgeous,
so good.
tragic film.
Mhm.
Once again, I've given you sad.
I don't know.
horror,
Yeah, I don't know if the ending of Wax is great either, to be fair. So
that's a good point.
Dealer's
it
choice.
doesn't really end in a pleasant
yeah.
place.
As pleasant as going through a bunch of trauma that you'll never forget for the rest of your life can.
I mean, that's why we watch horror, right? Like,
I'm like, oh, that's great. Let me go make some cookies real quick.
let me go eat some spadacopita real quick.
So, House of Wax, for those that do not know, I'm sure everyone's kind of had it in their zeitgeist.
And this is one that oh my God, first of all, we got a lot of people requesting us to talk about House of Wax, which
Yeah.
is part of why we're talking
It was
about
kind of perfect. I was like, ooh, 'cause
Yeah.
I've been wanting to talk about it. And everyone's like, House of Wax. I'm like,
And-
yes, please.
And then I
Say
saw
less.
and sent you yesterday while we're recording this. By the time
Yeah.
this comes out, it's going to have been like a week ago. But the Fangoria horror
Yeah.
podcast is also talking about the 2005 House of Wax this week.
They are. And
which-
they do more, they usually have like guests on
Yeah.
and they do like kind of like a watch note thing. So it's a
Yeah.
very like interesting. Definitely go check them out.
For
We're
sure.
fans,
Yeah.
so.
I didn't listen to it before recording this because I was like, I don't want to have their version in
Same.
my head.
Yeah.
But I'm going to go listen afterwards. So if
absolutely.
you need more House of Wax,
Yeah.
apparently we're all thinking about it
I know.
right now.
It is the time.
It's the time. It's the time of wax.
It's the time of Wax. So we'll take us back. We're going to 2005, almost 20 years ago at this
oh
point.
God.
It is
Ugh.
about a group of teens that are unwillingly stranded near a strange wax museum and soon must fight. Oh my God. And soon must fight, just like I'm fighting for
Yeah.
my life, to survive and keep from becoming the next exhibit. Which is, yeah.
Love how you put that.
It premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival April 30th, 2005, and then was released in theaters May 2005 by Warner Bros., which I feel like this is one of the first ones that I've covered that has like the next month gone
That's
straight
a very
to theaters.
quick
They were
release.
like, we're good.
Yeah. So they, unlike we've seen with our past couple of
Yeah, your next was like 2 years.
2 years.
so-
Same with Cabin in the Woods.
Yeah, a lot of
So-
around this time got
Yeah.
shelved and put. I think there just was a lot going
Mhm.
on in the horror world.
Apparently,
and so-
particularly at Lionsgate is what we're seeing. So it
That's
seems like
funny.
Warner Bros. Maybe had their act together
Yeah,
more.
We'll see. We'll pay attention.
Will they? Did they?
So this
Do
is
they?
directed. Yeah, I phonetically wrote this out so I wouldn't mess up his name
Good.
this time. So it was directed by Jaume Colette Serra.
Ooh.
This was actually the
Also
director's.
a French name?
I'm assuming.
Okay. A very French week we're
Yeah.
having. Wow.
The
are-
the coincidences
that's-
and patterns that we discover as we're doing
Again,
this.
I say it.
Intuition, baby.
Yeah.
Haunted?
Yeah, I was going to say the podcast is haunted. I
pretty
maintain.
sure we are.
Yeah. Or
So-
we are. Yeah. Well, yeah.
Probably us. So this was directed by Jaume Colette Serra. It was his first horror film, and the two horror films that followed actually were The Orphan in 2009 and The Shallows in 2016.
Oh, look at that.
And I wrote a note of like who was set to direct it, but I didn't really like what they had, so never mind. It was written. It's so funny. It's credited, and it says it's written by Charles Belden, who passed away in 1950. So I love that he's still on. And I looked at every source, and they always put him. So he was
Oh my
actually
God.
had written the 1932 short story The Waxworks, which
Oh.
served as the basis for the 1933 film Mystery of the Wax Museum, and then
Right.
obviously the 1953 House of Wax.
Which we love.
But I love that they, like, no matter where you look online
They
for
still credit
this one,
him.
they still credit him, which is
Oh,
awesome.
I love that.
Because it can send you down a rabbit
Yeah.
hole of like, oh, this came, like, for those that don't know, now you
now you know.
Yeah, now you know.
I feel bad that I didn't go and read his story because that would have been a very me thing to do.
There is a
but-
PDF, online for it. It doesn't look super long, but there's some. Yeah, he created a really cool story, and I'll kind of get into some firsts for House of Wax, the original. So
Wow.
it was obviously Charles Belden wrote the original story, and then who kind of adapted it were two brothers, Chad and Carrie Hayes,
Okay.
who are also the writers behind the Conjuring verse. So we love.
interesting. We love, yeah.
Yeah, two bros just broing it out, making some horror.
Horror bros.
just horror bros just reaching real deep back there. It was also produced by Joel Silver, which if you've
Sounds
heard,
familiar.
you definitely know him. So not only is he one of the founders of Dark Castle Entertainment who did this film, he produced the Matrix franchise, Lethal Weapon, and Die Hard. Ghost Ship, V for Vendetta, The Orphan, and like a bazillion.
Oh, so they worked together on The Orphan too.
Oh yeah.
So there was.
Oh yeah, later. Yeah.
Yep. They continued the horror relationship.
Yeah, which I think we've kind of discovered in this universe.
This genre. Yeah, you tend to find your horror peeps and then you stick to them.
Yeah. So yeah, he's kind of like, a do-it-all guy. He also has his own. He had his own production. Like I think it was like Silver Productions or something like that too, and then he started
creative naming.
Yes, yeah. And so I'll get into Dark Castle Entertainment a little bit later.
Cool.
It's starring, like I said, a bunch of like 2000s icons. We'll start with Chad Michael Murray as Nick, who, if you don't know, he's just the babe from One Tree Hill, Cinderella Story with Hilary Duff.
Oh my god!
And one of my favorites, Freaky Friday with Lindsay Lohan.
That was one of those movies that I'd like taped on TV as a little kid. That I would
Freaky
just
Friday.
Watch. Yeah. All the time.
If you have not watched it recently, I really implore you to. It is still so good.
Does it hold up?
Jamie Lee Curtis is just
an
I don't know if she can do anything wrong.
I truly think she is one of the best actors alive today. She is mommy. She's been mommy since.
Oh, I mean, since she was on screen, like birth.
Yes.
Yeah.
She came out of the womb mommy.
If you need to like cleanse the palate, Freaky Friday is so good.
So there's the programming.
Yeah. Freaky Friday.
Whichever order you watch these films in, you end with Freaky Friday.
Yeah. Or it's like in the middle and that's when you can eat.
Oh, I hate that.
We have the icon herself, Paris Hilton, as Paige. I didn't even.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say I didn't even write any credits for her. I go, she's just a fucking icon. The end. Like, let's move on.
She's just Paris Hilton.
Paris fucking Hilton.
It was fascinating to me. She like disappears from the middle half of this movie.
Yeah, gone.
And then just completely go.
She's just to die.
Yes, like she's
her
just like
Homeboy.
gone making out with Homeboy for the entire
which I love
action,
that though.
It's so Paris.
It's also so like the 2000s of like, and just horror like of the two people just fucking and boning the whole time. Or we're gonna leave them there and you're gonna forget about them till we just.
That they're going to get brutally murdered.
Yeah. We have Alicia Cuthbert.
Who, I have to admit, I know I'd recognized her name before. I thought it was a guy. As I was like looking through the credits, I was like, what else has Alicia Cuthbert been in? And I was like, that's not who in the cast I thought
it was.
Yeah.
She plays Carly. She's from The Girl Next Door, the TV series 24, and she's in Love Actually.
Oh, that's probably what I'm recognizing.
Yeah. She also, was convinced, even while watching it, even while writing these notes, I was like, that's Sophia Bush.
That's so funny.
Which Chad Michael Murray, and I'm going to get into why I know this fact. So he was engaged to her during this time too. He asked her to marry him. And I just thought that was her. And
were you a Chad Michael Murray fan back in the day? Is that what you're telling
wasn't.
Us? Oh, interesting.
And not like in that way.
Not
I was
that
like,
way.
he's like babely, a little too clean for me. I liked him a little bit dirtier than that.
Fair.
So we have, and then you said earlier, we have Jared Padalecki as Wade, who is obviously Sam Winchester from Supernatural.
Yeah.
The end. Yeah, I need not say anything else.
That's the only credit you need to know.
He is just so likable.
Oh my God.
In all things he does.
Yeah.
Particularly
one of those actors who I always feel like he's kind of just being Jared Padalecki and I don't care.
So, and I'll jump to it later, but there is an MTV miniseries about the making of House of Wax.
Oh my God.
Don't watch it. It will give you nothing but useless information. Which is why I'm so glad you're going to film theory, because I'm like, I know that Chad Michael Murray bought 500 candles to propose to his girlfriend. Well, that's what I learned from this.
I'm glad
against my will.
By force. I'm glad that you have some of the light tidbits because
yours goes dark.
My film is from 1960s France. There's not a whole lot of behind the scenes production info.
I got a real I didn't even think about that. I have a real dark fact to go with yours though.
Oh, yeah, might
make people sick.
Dark film.
Oh yeah, no, mine's pretty light.
Yeah. So how many candles did you say he used?
500, and he had to go to multiple places. Also, his assistant did not seem very nice. But I can say from the interviews, Jared Padalecki, Paris Hilton, angels. Aww. The rest of them, Just cover my mouth in wax.
That feels not surprising to me.
Yeah. So if you want to
Interesting.
get a dose of 2000s reality TV, watch it. I'll give you the name. I have it written down here. Some of the last people I'm going to talk about are Robert Richard as Blake, who was in one of my favorite TV shows of all time, My Cousin Skeeter.
I have never even heard of this. What is this? Al, fill me in.
Oh my God. Google it and you will be like,
this is why. Out. I saw you like blink twice.
Cousin Skeeter was a puppet in a world of real people, and his cousin Skeeter like had to come stay with Robert Richard. So he was his they were cousins, and it was just like a puppet, and it was one of the funniest shows, like kid shows on TV. I'm convinced
we need to get Devin Ludlow on.
Yeah, every episode we have a Devin.
Yes.
Devin.
I honestly don't even know if he listens to the podcast. I feel like he probably doesn't, given that he hasn't been like Siena. Stop talking.
He heard his name once, and he was like,
off.
Okay, creeps.
He's not wrong.
Devin. And then lastly, we have Brian Van Holt as Bo. He's from Black Hawk Down, SWAT, and like 2023's Quantum Leap. I don't really know him from much else. I'm gonna be honest.
Is there a 2023 Quantum Leap?
Yes, there is. It's a TV series.
What?
Was it always a TV series?
What are we doing? This is a disaster, Hollywood.
Speaking of disaster, guess how much it was to make this film?
Just production design alone. This had to be expensive, right?
It's for many reasons. I think not only just the production value, which again we'll get into, but just the other things that happen. Having Paris Hilton.
That's
take your stab at the budget.
20 million?
Oh, double it and give it to someone else.
Oh my God.
40 mil, baby.
What? So this is our most expensive horror.
I think
by far.
So.
That's so funny.
It's beefy.
Wow.
Again, for many reasons.
Beefy budget.
So it was 40 mil to make. It made 70 mil worldwide.
Not great, honestly.
Not great. So
like,
it earned...
It made its money back, but like to have spent 40... Well,
I think there was some other like... There's some other budgetary issues that happened on this. So it made 32 mil from North America and then earned 42 mil from VHS and DVD rentals. It was very much didn't do great in the box office, but then afterwards.
Which I feel like is often the case with horror. I think horror tends to have a longer trail than other kinds of film.
Yeah, I think, more, I mean, definitely more consistently. I don't know if it's just we're paying more attention to that.
There is that.
Yeah, I think a lot of it had to do because the marketing campaign for this. I don't know, do you remember the marketing campaign around this at all?
I don't.
So again, I was in high school. I think it was like 2003 when The Simple Life with Paris Hilton was out on TV, which I was obsessed with. The Von Dutch hats, I was just Nicole Richie and her.
They're dynamic.
So
iconic.
I mean, truly, also like the birth of like that kind of reality TV or like reality TV that became so big.
I also maintain that is like the friendship that all of us who have like failed closeted queer friendships in high school.
Yeah,
like, I think it was all based on the
God,
Paris Nicole
funny.
dynamic.
I mean, checks out for me.
Yeah. See,
checks out for me.
All of y'all tell us if this holds true for you. But I at least in my experience,
we need a poll. That's so funny.
Yeah.
I mean, again, the older I get, I'm like, how did I not clock? So
gay.
Gay. So the marketing campaign, unfortunately, was See Paris Die. And that was like it. That is all I remember. See Paris Die. Because a lot of horror fans were really upset that she was starring in a horror film.
Oh
and so like, again, it was a very divisional time when like, you can't be this and also be this, which is why I feel like I'm so effed up is because I'm constantly feeling like I have multiple sides. Like I like cutesy little things and I also like watching murder on screen to relax and listening to very heavy metal to calm myself. So you can be both. But in 2005
could not be both.
Could not be both. So it was See Paris Die. Everyone was really upset about her casting. But of course she was an icon.
Right.
And she made shirts that said See Paris Die and like wore them around. So there's like paparazzi photos you can
She
find.
is so much more
She's so intelligent.
self-aware than people give her credit for.
So,
Like,
which if you have not watched her documentary,
she's a smart
super smart
lady.
Super smart. And I also love in interviews her voice goes from like being really baby to like her normal voice, and it's one of my favorite things to listen to.
The switch.
It's my ASMR.
Yeah. Yes.
So I think the mistake and why I think it made so much money on the DVD VHS is because kids like me, teens like me, were big fans of her, and who would have gone to see it in theaters couldn't because of the rating.
Makes sense.
So we all had to wait and see it after, but we showed up and
showed
turned
up.
out.
Yeah. No, I would have been 8 when this came out.
God.
So
Gross, Sienna.
I know. I'm so sorry, everybody.
I don't like doing math like that.
Yeah.
So we're gonna
Moving
move
right
on.
along. Yeah.
So speaking of like the rating and not being able to see it, there is an uncut version that was rated R21 in Singapore. That
I did not know that rating existed.
21 and older are movies. I feel like there was a brief time. I don't know if they do that anymore.
I guess that was a thing for like a really brief period in the 2000s, wasn't it?
They like didn't know what to categorize. Now there's, with streaming and stuff, there's so many different.
I feel like also what an R can be has become a lot more permissive.
We've pushed that out a little
yeah.
bit.
Thank God. I support this.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're running a horror podcast.
Yeah. Love it. So there's actually 2 scenes that had been trimmed in order to secure them like an NC-16 rating. The first scene was the body dragging scene where they had the head slowly detaches itself from the torso.
Right.
Chill.
Right.
The second scene was where the killer removes the pole that was jammed into Paris's head. Yeah. And then the DVD features, if you have the DVD, also have an alternative opening where a young woman, Jennifer, is stranded on the road after her car breaks down. And she calls the towing company. Bo obviously shows up. She tries to signal to him, gets no response. And then the truck speeds up and she tries to run away. And then Bo grabs her like by the neck and like, does a slight toss into the windshield. And like she dies. Yeah. So that was the other, which would have been, I feel like sets the tone.
Yeah.
So differently than
it does.
I love the opening.
Yeah.
I love like a little bit of a backstory opening.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite things, like starting off back in time and then going. It's like, ooh, what is that going to mean later?
Well, and okay, so I don't know how gross and dark. I'm gonna get gross and dark.
Yeah, this is a pretty gross. Yeah,
it's a pretty gross. And dark
don't
movie.
eat burgers or spanakopita while listening to this.
Please, we did it so you don't have to. As I was thinking about like why is this so horrifying to me, I think part of it is that obviously I am somebody who also consumes a lot of true crime audio content, and I'm also somebody who in school kind of through a very strange series of circumstances that was not what I set out to do, ended up specializing in Holocaust film.
Yeah, we talked about this.
We talked about this a little bit, not on the podcast, but so because of those 2 things, I know a lot about both human soaps being made in the Holocaust, and also there's
a lot of really tough.
There's also
tough to swallow stuff.
There's tough to swallow stuff, and there was in like the 1940s, I want to say, in Italy. I think it was during the war. There was a female serial killer who was making human soaps from her victims, and so I like the opening scene of this with her like smoking the cigarette and the pot of wax on the stove. I immediately flashed to that like true life serial killer story, and like that set the tone for me.
Oh gosh, you were like, this is too real for me. Oh wow, no, that's such an interesting
human soap.
That's such an interesting fact to know while going into this. I think.
Very much.
Yeah, people are perverse and gross and awful, and we've always been that way.
Yes, and that's like, to me, I maintain that that's part of like what's important about horror, is that like it is an outlet for that other than making actual human soaps.
Yeah,
like just watch it on TV.
Just watch. Yeah, there's outlets, guys. Come on, all you murderers listening right now. Please don't be a murderer.
Siena's advice for Murderer's Corner.
Speaking
Moving
of
right along.
tough to watch things, the miniseries on MTV called Movie Life House of Wax, which follows. You can watch it on YouTube. There's all 5 episodes on a YouTube channel.
Did you watch all 5 of them?
I love to
Why did you do this to
self-torture.
yourself? Yeah, this sounds awful.
It was bad. I listened to it while I was doing notes, to be fair.
Okay, that makes it a little
And
more
yeah,
bearable.
learned nothing. You can watch it on a YouTube channel called Horror Fest. The E in that is a 3. They have all 5 episodes just in one video. It's only like 40. I mean, I think this was a very, like, each episode was 10 minutes.
Okay, all right.
But if you want to just feel repulsed in a different way, I would suggest watching that. It was a tough time. I don't think anyone at this time had media training. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
I just will say that. There's a lot of stuff where you're like, oh, okay. Opinions
You
have
said
changed.
that. You went there.
Again, Jared Padalecki, Paris Hilton, Angels.
That's comforting.
Yeah.
They're the ones that I want to be good
They're
people.
the ones we're rooting for them.
Yeah. Which is funny because they're not. Neither of them's the final girl. You know.
No. Yeah.
I'm not really.
I don't know if I
Are
even
you
would.
rooting for the final girl?
I don't. That's actually a really good question for this.
Yeah.
Unlike your film,
Mm-hmm.
you're just hoping to make it out,
Yeah.
kind of.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe rooting for yourself to be the final girl to make it through the film.
There's almost a part of me that's like by the end kind of on Vincent's side. A little bit.
Again, watch the MTV miniseries. It'll change.
Oh,
Change your
no.
viewing.
Was Vincent like particularly awful?
Mm-mm.
Oh, okay.
He's not in it.
Oh,
He
all
wasn't popular at the time. MTV didn't care about him.
right. I mean, I guess also you never really see his face in the movie.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah.
Just to note too, at this time, again talking about 2000s,
Mhm.
it was one of 4 major horror remakes released in 2005, which I thought was really interesting. Which was there was The
Oh.
Fog.
Uh-huh.
I like how I say. Oh yeah, it itself is the 4th. I was like, I only have 3. The Fog, Amityville Horror, and Chaos, which I don't know what Chaos is, but those were 4 remakes that came out. So I think it was a really interesting time. Again, 2000. Obviously, like most of the things I've covered are like 2007, 2005. A lot of good horror coming out, in my opinion.
And I think horror in particular is an area where I am much less frustrated by remakes than in the rest of the film world. And I think part of that is that our standards for what scares us have changed so much over time. And so like the way that a film made in 1954 to scare audiences with a wax house presents that wax house is going to be very different from the way it's presented to scare audiences in 2005. And to me, I think that there's like an inherent value in both of them in a way that there's not necessarily with remakes in other areas.
Yeah, I mean, they're all films are a commentary of the time. So with horror,
Absolutely.
that changes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
and it's
especially-
interesting to see how that director or whoever like rewrites it,
Yeah.
takes it.
Well, especially just because horror is like, it's like about producing like sensation, right? Like a physiological sensation almost. And like that requires different things over time as we're
Yeah.
like exposed to different things. And so
I wonder
yeah.
what if someone remade House of Wax now.
I was just thinking
Like,
about
where-
that. How different would it be?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. There's still like that primal fear of being
Mhm.
the body trap thing gets
Yeah.
me. That's what
I-
gets me about this.
I
Being
f-
stuck in one
For
zone.
whatever reason, I feel like I could see like a 2025 House of Wax
20 years
remake.
later.
Yeah. Yeah,
Where,
right?
I mean, what's his name? Lester is still like
There you
alive at the
go.
end.
There you
so
go.
Bring him back.
Like I could see like a Brandon Cronenberg version of this made
Ooh.
now, and I feel like it would
A
be
little bit more artful.
I think the modern version would probably take place much more in the basement. Like I think we would see a lot more of the waxworks being
Yeah.
created.
I feel like there could be like a prequel to this.
Yeah.
Of really seeing like the lead up of them taking it
Yeah.
over.
I would be really interested in seeing Trudy's backstory. Like almost like a Pearl versus X type
Yeah,
of situation where we
yeah.
go back in time
Yeah,
and see her
totally.
origin story.
Watch, it's like we're gonna get news tomorrow on like
But-
our Instagram.
yeah.
Like House of Wax being remade, coming out 2025.
Directed by Brandon Cronenberg.
We're just manifesting over here. So if
Yeah.
there's anything that you guys want made, just like ask us to talk about it on the podcast.
Careful what you wish for. That seems like a real monkey's paw situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of talking about that, just a little side note that Paige was actually, there were 2 other actresses that they really wanted for the role, which would have changed this vibe, I think, completely. Jennifer Connelly, who actually turned it down because she decided to do Dark Water in 2005 instead, and Kate motherfucking Winslet. I mean, she said no.
Well,
to be fair, for good reason.
good for Kate.
But
wasn't she making
2005?
Yeah. So when this was being made, 2004, presumably. She just had Eternal Sunshine coming out.
Oh
So they're looking at
gosh.
Eternal Sunshine and being like, do you want to make
She's
House
a little,
of Wax?
she's a little
though?
crazy, yeah. She's a little wonky in that.
Oh,
That's
that
funny.
is
I forgot that came out in
ambitious of
2004.
the casting directors. Wow.
This film was the first horror film remake that Jared Padalecki starred, and then the second one he went on to do was actually Friday the 13th that came out in 2009. I have not seen that. Yeah, I don't think I've seen that one. I have to go deep. And then last we have, and this is just talking a little bit about the casting. We have Chad Michael Murray. He was, obviously, we listed the films earlier that he was in, and he wanted to break away from his like clean boy, like heartthrobby aesthetic, and wanted to do something a little bit edgier. And just again, insight into Chad Michael Murray at this time. I have a little quote from him.
Oh no.
I'm probably just going to stop it at my favorite part, which is very early on. He said, Joel called my agent and said that he wants me to sit down and have a meeting. And I said, rock and roll. I read the script and thought to myself, can I do a horror movie? I've seen horror movies. And my whole life, I wanted to know if like it was in my blood and I was able to do it.
Oh.
Needless to say, he took the role. But I love that he's like, he called me and what did I say? Rock and roll.
New ick unlocked.
Yeah, again, I don't know what's worse, the MTV series or
Yeah,
so
I'm too gay for that. Too gay.
it's brutal. So I don't have a ton of facts about the script, really. Obviously, it was a loose remake of the 1953 of the same name, which was then a remake of the 1933 Mystery of the Wax Museum.
So it does feel like we're about due for another one, right?
I think if we're living by like Jeepers Creepers rules,
Yeah.
I think it's like every like 20 years.
Yeah.
So he
We've
comes
got
out.
one more year, guys. Get on it.
And then I was curious if you had seen either the original House of Wax or the Mystery of the.
Again, I watched a lot of Vincent Price movies as a little kid, but I didn't
love
watch
Vincent Price.
that particular one because I'm so scared of waxworks.
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, sorry.
Which like no, it was great for me because it's like that is like the realm of horror that is the most
It's so fun though
brutally effective.
It's fun for people like us to find horror that
really gets at you that way because like not a lot does.
Yeah, again, we have like I think we live in this like comfort movie genre
Totally,
for us, but like it's hard to really feel
frightened.
Yeah.
And I almost like took a video, like a live reaction video for you.
Siena, I did too, but I looked nasty because I was just out of the shower. My hair was like everywhere, and I was just like, but I almost took watching. I saw the face. What happened? Why did we do the same thing?
I was sitting there watching it, and like this was the first time in like probably a decade that I've during a horror movie been like, no.
I have a video I sent Trav, speaking of, I like sent him a video of my reaction to this scene, and I saw the face, and I was just like, oh my God. Yeah, there's moments like that in both of these films.
So I'm glad we could recreate this for each other.
It was good to feel that.
It was,
though.
yeah. No, I'm glad you had a moment like that with Eyes Without a Face, but
Well, to kind of some levity to
my wax fear.
things.
My deep-seated wax trauma.
I'm so sorry. Speaking of, here's this wax hand. No. So
did you see the way I just flinched at the word wax?
Santa would have busted through that wall. I found a little fun fact about the original House of Wax from 53. It was actually the first 3D movie with phonic, I don't know, is it stereo sound, which was released in the brief like little golden age of 3D between 1952 and 1954. So again, I was like, for those of you who have brain farts like me, I was like, what does that mean? It's just the stereo sound that we all know,
right?
Which is
where like sound on your right side is different from sound on your left side, basically.
So like an
3D
audio 3D.
audio. Yeah. I feel like Warren on the other side must be just like, this is
he's
the
like,
worst explanation.
He's like, please never talk about audio again. If you do, I will I will unplug your power source.
He's already just like slowly reaching for the cable.
Just tears forming in his eyes. I also
Just one tear.
a little wax tear permanently there. For the rest of the episode. I also realized like I hadn't given much thought to, and this is a little tangent, to like 3D.
Yeah.
And because I was like, oh my God, 1953, there's 3D.
This was also the period that smell-o-vision was invented too.
Yeah,
it was a
last.
weird
At least
time
3D
for
kind of
cinema.
has hung around. I wouldn't say it's doing great, but the earliest 3D film was The Power of Love, which premiered at the Ambassador Hotel in LA in 1922.
Whoa. I
Yeah.
had no idea it was that early. I
I
thought it was in the
know.
50s.
I was going to say, I thought
Man,
60s until I
yeah.
read this. And I was like, oh, maybe they were like
Interesting.
testing it, and then 60s, and then
Whoa.
60s seems like the trippy time.
Yeah.
But 1922.
That's fascinating.
And the camera rig that made that happen was a product of film producer Harry K. Farrell and cinematographer Robert F. Elder. So just a little fun
Oh.
fact about 3D. I feel like the predecessor House of this one didn't
That's-
make any, big things, but the predecessor House of Wax did.
I was gonna say, did the 2005 version? Is there a 3D version of this?
God, I hope not.
That sounds really
It
disturbing.
feels like there probably was.
Yeah, it feels like the sort of thing that they would have made 3D in 2005,
Yeah,
and
just the wax flying at your face.
unbearable.
That would have been the day Siena. Siena wouldn't be here if they had seen that.
True. Out.
So we're gonna move on to some production notes. Even though the film is partially an Australian film production, it's one of 2 Australian slashers released in 2005, which the second was Wolf Creek, which I want to talk about so bad on here because I love Australian horror.
Yes.
It's brutal.
It is so disturbing, especially the way Australian horror deals with like nature and the idea of nature wanting to kill you. Obviously.
And them kind of being like a step up, them having the like the home field advantage. Sports guys.
God, yeah.
I know sports now. But yeah, I love Wolf Creek, and it was really cool to learn.
We should definitely put that on our list.
It's
for
on the
future
list.
parents.
It's on the list.
Yes.
Let us know.
It's on the list.
The film is actually the 3rd film that Dark Castle Entertainment distributed and remade. The first 2 films were the 1999 House on Haunted Hill and 2001's 13 Ghosts, which is weird enough. We were talking about that again before we started recording today.
There you go.
And then these 2 films are remakes by films of the same title, obviously, and directed by William Castle, who is actually who Dark Castle Entertainment was named after.
I was wondering. Okay.
Full circle. They're just really drawing it all out.
Cute.
This was House of Wax was Dark Castle Entertainment's 5th film in total. And for those of you that don't know, it's an American film production label. And like I said earlier, it's Joel Silver was one of the founders. Robert Zemeckis and Gilbert Adler were the 3 in it. Yeah.
I don't know if this is correct, but I'm having like memory come up from actually our Misery episode. Am I right in remembering that Rob Reiner did some stuff with them too, with Dark Castle?
Ooh.
I feel like that might be a thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
We're gonna put that out there.
Yeah, we have to
have no
look
idea.
at that after. Could be right, could be wrong.
Could be either.
You
I'm
can
right
do the
or I'm
fact
wrong.
checking on that one. We don't have the internet in front of us right now.
For good reason.
This production company also did Splice, and the Orphan movies.
Is there a horror film called Splatter? Because if
I know, because we need to cover Splice and
yes,
Splatter.
that'd
Be
so
real
cute.
confusing and meta.
Yeah. Real who's on first situation there. Yeah.
Yeah. So the next piece is a little bit. I wrote the title. The heading for my section for this is Set and Destruction. To be fair, that's what it's about. But
So dark.
I was like, I'm so edgy. So the film takes place in Louisiana. Obviously, it was shot in Australia. The town of Ambrose was constructed in 10 weeks and was modeled after a real town. I can't say that. I can't say
It was
that.
modeled after a real town.
Which it was a town Esmara, which was built by the Italians in Africa during World War II. So they kind of modeled this like
It was a
deco
wax
style.
town?
I don't think it was wax.
Oh, okay. I was like, oh my god.
I just think like the little like, because when we have that last, I can't remember if it's earlier, but like the last shot is really what's memorable when they're like driving out of town. Just seeing that little town like by, you know, surrounded kind of by nothing.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it feels very caricature-y, but
very
it's modeled
much.
after.
Interesting.
And then they also had 5 huge stages that consisted of various sets, which those were, I mean, almost there's a lot of wax in here. I'm going to ask you how much you think.
Literal tons, I'm sure.
Yes.
Like, yeah. Oh.
I mean, we can jump ahead. You want to guess how many tons?
Oh, so horrifying. 20? Really?
Yep.
20 tons?
20
I can't believe I got that.
of wax. I could see it coming. I was like, they're going to nail it. They're going to get 20.
It's just
Isn't
because I guessed 20 on the budget too. So I was like, we're going to go with it again.
20 is a safe bet, I feel like, for budgets. And yeah. 20 tons of wax.
That's
which
so disturbing.
was not great for them. So a lot of the sets were like fully made of wax. I mean, down to the door. I don't know why they needed to go that hard. I'm like, is wax like a cheap substance? Were they like, we'll just make it for wax for like, but like
for the cost.
everything was made. Floors.
Well, and you can tell too. It makes a
tell.
difference in the visual texture on screen, which is part of why this got to me so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is like great for the actors. I think it's
Very
visually
real.
they got
Very disturbing.
very disturbing, very distinct. Unfortunately, having wax and having fire on sets does
and
not
also
necessarily
with really hot lighting too.
really
right?
hot lighting.
How did they not melt the set?
Oh, Siena.
Oh,
Sweet baby. They did.
sweet summer child.
So in June of 2004, the soundstage they used for filming burned to the ground.
So this is our third horror movie that had an on-set fire on the soundstage.
I mean, I gotta be honest, even if you're taking every precaution, fire is an element. And it is unpredictable and like good luck when you're having people like
do things with fire.
Yeah, it's just like your chances are high.
You're not wrong.
You know? So it burned to the ground. The only good thing I learned from the MTV miniseries was that you could actually see the footage of the moment it happened.
Whoa.
Chad Michael Murray was on set filming. He said, I'm going to be petty for 2 seconds.
Please.
He was like, I felt my knuckles start to bubble. And that's when I knew something was wrong. And I was
I'm
like,
sorry,
dude, I think
what?
maybe the big old 10-foot flames around you and everyone running off set probably should have clued you into that. But anyways, which is scary. I don't want to that's traumatic.
I have so
I'd
many,
like to break away from jokes like that.
questions.
I can't imagine being an actor on set. So you might ask how did this happen, Sienna? Or
How did
Al?
this happen?
You're not asking yourself, you're asking me.
How did this happen, Al?
Let me tell you, Sienna. They obviously took precautions. They had fire safety.
Right.
They sprayed fire retardant. So they were actually shooting. There was a level below them, so they were. It was the scene where the wax floor is melting through, which was not visual effects. That was real. There's some visual effects in there, but that was real. And they didn't kind of think about that. We could spray the bottom floor with fire retardant, but the wax that's melting on top of that will completely negate that eventually.
Oh,
so that's exactly what happened. Is they did the right thing, but didn't count for the wax melting.
Oh my!
I don't know. My brain can't comprehend
Did they not
that.
read the script for their own movie?
Same. I was like, oh, I get it, and I was like, no, I don't.
No,
I don't get how that can happen.
That
seems like the biggest mistake you can make.
Wow.
How do you not let's wax the melt or melt the wax and then I can't even talk straight. It's because I'm not straight.
We're so mad, you guys.
So that's what happened. It melted and it really started to fire. Everyone rushed out. Luckily, only one crew member got some burns. But this thing went up.
Oh my God.
In full smoke. Later, so like the equipment was ruined, props, cameras, like lights, like everything burned down to the ground, which is why I say like I feel like part of the budget probably went to that.
I'm sure.
As a result of the fire, in January 2006, Village Theme Park Management and Warner Brothers Movie World Australia sued special effects expert David Fletcher and Wax Productions for $7 million in negligence over the fire. And they settled out in court. But I'm like, again, like to our point, like you didn't think the wax was gonna melt?
Yeah, I think.
And cover the thing that would have protected you?
Well,
A day.
and like I feel like the insurance should have brought this up at some point before it happened.
Someone somewhere.
Yeah. There are too many
Literal
people.
house of wax.
Guys.
Life imitating art. It's so frustrating to hear stuff like that. Like, because it just could have put it so many crew members.
Yeah, it's so.
If someone was just on the wrong side of that fire,
I
couldn't walk over the floor because it was not like I would have to die over that, man.
Oh my god. I've got to say though, I do have like an incredible mental image of this like house of wax going up in smoke as Paris Hilton just like Heather style smokes a cigarette in the foreground.
She wasn't there, so she might have been. She found out about it later and she's like, that's what you get, bitch.
She finds out about it later and she's like, that's hot.
That's hot.
That's hot.
Missed opportunity. That's what t-shirts we need to make. Is just the house of wax set on fire with just that's hot. Nobody can take my idea. It's copyrighted already by the time this comes out. Don't you even get on it. Don't you dare. For those who know, they know.
They know.
Anyways, so again, the 20 tons of wax, that's where most of it went to.
No wonder the budget's so high. My God, that's a lot of wax.
Yeah. So on top of the physical wax that we had, I thought they were really thoughtful in this as I was kind of reading through. Colette Serra, the director, made sure to have a really nice blend of practical and VFX within this. He keeps saying every interview, he's like, well, I was more like worried about aesthetics. He's like, he wanted like a look. Like that's what he was worried about. But
Very French.
Yeah. I didn't listen to like actual audible like interviews with him, but I can only imagine
him with the French accent. Yeah.
But I thought it was really cool because he did say that he wanted everything to be practical and then have VFX kind of come in afterwards and fill in. So the areas where on set they might be exposed to danger. I wonder if this came before or after. He made sure like that's where he would fill in the wax. So they kind of had a really nice he kind of let the department heads of those areas work with each other and kind of took a step back and was like, I trust you all to make this happen in the way that I want, which is kind of like a cool, especially I don't know if that's first time director showing of like maybe he felt overwhelmed. He's like, you can all do it. You can handle it. Or if it was just pure trust.
It reminds me of Cabin in the Woods too, where it's like first time director has a commitment to doing as much practical as possible. But it pays off because then, you know, the areas, like you can tell a couple of the shots that are CGI as the floor is melting.
Oh yeah, they're very
but I think they hold up comparatively well.
I think so. I think one of the things I love revisiting this movie or like love introducing people to this movie because there are a lot of practical effects in this that
are really well done.
They look great.
Yeah. No, there was no point where I was like, oh, that special effect looks really hokey now, 20 years later.
Yeah. It's fun. There's even some scenes, like really particularly towards the end, like we talk about like getting like sick and whatever. Jared Padalecki's scenes get me.
Oh my God, yeah. That's
which he actually, so I didn't know this because again, you think like safety and stuff on set. He offered it up. They did have like stunt doubles and stuff like that. But he offered up just to like see. He says he gets very claustrophobic, but he put that helmet thing on, which is so like Saw. He was like, it was really weird to have these like wires poking in that acted as needles. And he was like, I was panicking because it was like, it would take me a few minutes to get out of it if I got claustrophobic. They also sprayed him with hot wax. So all the wax that they sprayed people with was real. I'm so sorry. You're just gonna have wax-filled nightmares tonight, aren't you?
I really am.
You're just gonna just like eye twitch. I'm like, Siena, what's wrong? You're like, wax, the wax. Should I take the candles out of our office right now?
You're just gonna
Should
see
I
me
call
like
Twig? Be like,
with
clear
them.
the office. No wax today.
Emergency.
Yeah, but how? I mean, I think that's horrifying.
Oh my
too.
God, yeah.
I would totally do it though. I'd be
Yeah,
like,
probably.
but there's so those shots like where they're spraying him when he's in the thing, like they're spraying him
That's-
with hot wax.
I
Which
mean,
again, you
you
feel
feel it. You feel it. You do.
Yeah.
That's the practical effects, man. Thank you for your commitment to Mr. Padalecki. It paid off.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
Baby angel.
Yeah.
Director Colette Serra also, like I said, he believed his specialists around him would deliver the results, and he was quoted saying, "Our first commandment in visual effects is to not notice the effect in this kind of genre." And then he continued saying, "The film has a contemporary setting, and you want everything to be believable and real. So transparency is the core of everything."
I love it.
So I love that.
said.
Again, a horror director that really, like, again, that's the genre. It's the tactical, it's the visceral, it's the, you can feel it. So to have the more practical effects you have in horror, I really think that's what makes it, one,
Very
stand the test
much.
of time, and two, I think it really has like a bigger impact.
Well, and I think part of it is going back to conversations we've had about how it's so much scarier when things in horror are showing like kinds of pain that you've experienced. I think part of why a concept like this works is that like everybody's felt hot wax. So it makes
Yeah.
a difference to have that be a practical effect because we know what that looks like when it's real. We know what it feels like when it's real.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah, that would be a
there's-
hard one to.
it would be a hard one to fake. Yeah.
Which you said in the scenes that they do it, you can tell.
Yeah, yeah.
So-
But I mean, it's, burning an entire wax museum down. I can understand. It's
And they did have like some of the sets too. They had to build like miniatures of like
Oh,
the
I was
helms, but they were worried about
wondering.
like the scale of that too, is because obviously when wax melts, there's a
Right.
certain scale to it. So they had to
Yeah.
make sure they built these internal structures
Oh,
under the
interesting.
wax to make sure it melted in a
In the
way
right
that didn't
way.
fully
Yeah.
collapse on
Oh,
itself in a way that
interesting.
didn't feel to scale.
Yeah, well, because like if you've got just like a single drip, but it's on a
But
scale,
yeah, it's like huge. on
Yeah,
that.
it's gonna, you're
Which,
gonna notice.
Yeah, I think the scales they were still. I say miniature. I think they're pretty
even
big.
even a miniature
Yeah.
is usually going to be like, I guess most people can't see this, but
Yeah.
like it's
Arms stretched. Stretch your
arms
arms out.
stretched out. Yeah,
So I just thought that was interesting
That's
how much
fascinating.
time, because dealing with wax is such a
it's
tricky thing. terrifying thing.
you're really putting me through my paces this episode.
So sorry. We'll be moving on from wax soon. So
Will
some
we ever
other
be moving on from wax, or will we just be stuck in it forever with like a little human popsicle in the middle of
oh
it?
god,
Like,
yeah, little flesh pop.
yeah, like
Oh,
a,
the
like a
scene where his like
creamsicle.
face gets peeled off too. Oh, and his little eyes are like moving around. He's like, help. He can't even scream. How much more can I make you squirm with this? You know when his cheek came out, he has teeth.
that scene really got me. That really got me. Yeah.
Some other practical makeup effects we have. Brian Van Holt, who played Beau and Vincent, underwent obviously like a huge makeup transformation for both roles. Alicia had actually, in the scene where her lips get glued together, she actually did that. So it was a little bit of
She
method.
did? Oh my god.
Yeah, which you again talking about
That's-
things you can't really fake. I feel
yeah.
like that's one of them. So she glued her lips together. I'm assuming with very safe glue. We hope. Some other on-set facts with that is Jared Padalecki and Paris appeared in an episode of Supernatural together at some point. I think it was
Aw.
like after this, which centered around a wax museum,
Oh my god.
and even had like a little like hint, wink, wink, to the episode or to the movie in the episode, which I think is really cute that they like went on and
Yeah,
I'm sure it was
I
like
love
again the sweet
that.
baby angels of the group. Jared Padalecki was, I have to say his full name. I feel like I just can't call him Jared. He was a foot taller than his co-star. And
Aw.
so in scenes where
Big
they're like
boy.
very wide, when it's wide, there's like a foot difference. And then
That's
obviously
so
in their
funny.
close-ups or like
Yeah.
shots, she's the same
Taller,
height, so it's
yeah.
very fun to watch. Kind of like, oh, she's tall, oh, she's short, up. I think that's really funny because how do you
Yeah.
fake that?
Yeah, you can't.
Also, a little fun fact in the end credits, I don't know if you watch, I love watching through end credits.
I usually do. I didn't on this one.
Well, there's just some
What did I
fun little
miss?
letters in the credits.
Oh,
They start
no.
to like melt on screen, and then also some of the letters like are joined together, just like Bo and Vincent when they
I
were
love
born,
that.
which I just think is like a fun little detail. I love when people do that.
Which, speaking of, at first I was like, the Vincent signature on his pieces looks exactly like the way Vincent van Gogh would write his first name. So I was like, oh, it's a Van
funny.
Gogh reference. And then I was like, Siena, it's obviously a Vincent Price reference.
It's oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That has to be why they named him Vincent.
There's also, now I'm trying to figure out where it is in if my notes or if I'm sure it's a Vincent Price episode.
Right?
Or
it has to be.
nod.
Yeah.
Because the previous one.
Yeah.
There's also a scene where Wade is like looking at Dr. Sinclair's supplies and stuff, and there's they have like the doctor's first name is Victor, and that's a Victor Frankenstein reference. But I think if we've learned anything about horror, if we think it's a reference, it's a reference.
Yeah. It's it's a very self-cannibalizing genre,
Yes.
right? Yeah. Yeah.
Some little notes on music is at the end you'll hear the My Chemical Romance song, and that song actually came out only 2 months prior to this, so it was obviously like a really huge deal. And I think I love like a good pop or like pop rock like of the time song at the end there.
I also love any horror movie that has like a little metal needle drop is always fun, because I think that's metal music and horror movies I think get put into the same mental box a lot of the time.
Yeah, obviously.
And it's always satisfying to see that.
And then just like it uplifts you at the end. You just kind of like bop around. This film also was the composer John Ottman's 8th horror film.
Wow.
He did Snow White, A Tale of Terror, which I do not know, but I want to know. He did Halloween H2O, Lake Placid, which I would love to do on this podcast. I love Lake Placid. Yeah. The Orphan, so again, they kind of all work together. Gothica, Hide and Seek, Eight-Legged Freaks, which is great.
Amazing.
So he, I love a horror movie composer.
Yes.
And so I just have as like kind of like a little bit of a wrap up. We know my feelings on this film. I love this film. I think it's great. I actually think the acting isn't too bad for the time.
No.
And so the public, obviously, like I said, they didn't really like love it at first. But again, being 2005, having the actors that had in there.
Yeah.
Paris Hilton won at the Razzies, worst supporting actress was I like. So there was a lot of like, I know. I love that was like the only thing she won in this was worst supporting, which I don't even think she was that bad.
I feel
in
like
the horror genre, she's pretty great.
I saw what she was doing as like intentional comic relief.
Yeah, I also think, what, she was having a good time.
She was having a great time. And I was having a good time watching her. And you know what?
She's so likable on screen.
Absolutely.
I think she's the perfect, if you're going to cast someone like that like doesn't really do things like that.
I also, oh my God, just because you're saying that, I wrote down a note during her sex scene.
Oh gosh.
Saying if there's anybody who feels like a living waxwork, it's Paris Hilton. Because there's something oddly stiff about the way she moves.
She is like a gangly baby deer.
Yes.
And she does not know how to control those long limbs of hers.
No, she really doesn't.
She needs to just be protected at all costs. Well, I love her so much.
There's like a little bit about the motion there that has this like weird mechanical jerkiness that I was like, it was so perfect.
She should have been one that was coated in wax. We'd be like, spot the difference.
Yes, you can't.
So with that, I'm going to end on that note.
Great.
I have a couple other little thingies, but we can put those on social media.
Oh my God. So. Well, and I also think that's like, you've teed me up very nicely here, because I think like one of the things that I love the most about Eyes Without a Face is that central female performance, the physicality of it, because
oh my God,
there is something about the way she moves that is just so like a marionette. Like everything she does
mesmerizing.
Right?
And then the way she, like her little arms and even like her neck, she's just like her neck sticks out and it's so
long neck and the way she like turns it and it's
beautiful. Very marionette like.
Yeah.
Just so beautiful.
So
even with the mask.
Right?
Sorry, I don't want to jump too far ahead.
No. Tell me your viewing experience.
So it was actually, this was, I think the one of all the ones you've picked thus far, I think this was the one I was the most excited about. And I'd never, obviously everyone knows the song Eyes Without a Face, which is directly.
Oh, it's a direct reference, which I've got notes on that too. It's,
such a good song.
Yeah.
Which I listened to multiple times.
Oh yeah,
up until I watched the
100%.
film.
I think I sent you the Angel Olsen cover.
Yes. Yeah.
So good.
So good.
Yeah. Eyes Without a Face.
It's so good.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this was the one I think I was the most excited about. I remember you just sent me, again, I was like, I kind of want to do House of Wax. Like people have been saying it online that like we should do it. So we were trying to find something that paired and you sent me that and kind of gave me the brief overview. And I was like, that sounds so good.
I was so
I
was like both relieved and also a little nervous because I was like, it's not a super gory film. It's not necessarily that scary, depending on, maybe that's just me. Maybe that's because I've seen it before.
There's some brutal elements in there. I think it's just such a beautiful film. But yeah, I was like super, so I watched it last night and I was super excited. And within the first, like with the music, and then just even like the first few minutes of like, wait, whoa, like we're just like kind of going into this. 'Cause I didn't watch a trailer.
Oh, I'm so
other
glad.
than your like one sentence synopsis. I had not.
Which I think all I told you was plastic surgery gone wrong.
Yeah. And I think my brain was like, I love the old Twilight Zone episodes. Those are like my comfort.
Very connected.
Such a comfort show for me. And so I was like, this feels like it's going to be like that. Yes. And I got to say, thank you.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Loved.
Oh, I'm so relieved.
Loved this movie. And like everyone needs to watch it.
Oh,
truly.
I'm so glad.
Yeah.
I was so scared that like you'd gone in with so much excitement for it that it was going to be like not scary enough and like not live up to your expectations. And I was like,
I ate it up.
Nervous walking in. I was like, what if Al hated it?
I like truly, it's like one of my new.
Oh, I'm so
I like
glad.
will be talking about this with everybody. I love it so much for so many reasons.
It just sticks with you.
Oh, absolutely.
Like there's nothing like it.
And I mean, not that I've seen at least.
Well, and like I think part of it is like once you've watched Eyes Without a Face, you realize how many other movies that we love are made by people who watched and loved Eyes Without a Face. Like it's another one of those where you can see the legacy.
Had. When did you first watch it?
This is one that I watched in film school.
That makes sense. It's a very film school.
It's a very film school. Although it wasn't assigned. This is one I have
funny.
My absolute favorite professor, who's the reason that I ended up studying Holocaust film, Annette Insdorf. Shout out to Annette. She's the person who does most of the Q&A and panel moderation for the Telluride Film Festival.
Oh, cool.
And I just am absolutely obsessed with her. I love her so much. I just think she's the coolest film mama out there.
Yeah. That was big for me. He was my production design. Oh my God. We're doing great. Production design teacher. I'm just waxing over is really what.
Waxing poetic?
Yeah. But yeah, those teachers make such a difference with
such a big difference.
Film.
And so and everybody was like a little bit intimidated by Annette Insdorf because she was like famously the toughest teacher.
Oh, those are my favorite teachers. Yeah.
And so I went in and I was like, I have to impress Annette.
And I have to win you over.
Yeah. Notice me, senpai. Yeah. And so anytime she mentioned a movie in a lecture, I would write its name down and then I would go watch it. So
and then you would like casually bring it up in conversation.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Just like walk by her office and be like, so I was watching Eyes Without a Face the other night. Yeah. You know.
I totally see this.
Totally casual.
But how great for for me now.
It was
and
amazing.
Hopefully everyone that watches this after.
So like please watch Eyes Without a Face. It's so beautiful. It's so heart-wrenching. It's very much like people have described it as kind of like a Beauty and the Beast story, which like it very much is. And I think especially like working for the Jean Cocteau, it's a very Jean Cocteau type of film.
Yeah.
But it's also, it absolutely is frightening too, or at least I think so. Yeah. I'm curious, how scary did you find it?
Scary. I don't know if scary.
Mm-hmm.
It's I think along the lines of like the heart-wrenching of
Mm-hmm.
it, and also
Mm-hmm.
just like the morals of it, I think
Yes.
were the
Yeah.
part that kind of made me sick.
It's
Um
that
that
father-daughter
was
relationship is
Yeah, and just the
mm.
mom, and I think,
Mm-hmm.
you spend some time with the girls as well. Um so yeah, I think the morals of it made me sick. Obviously the scene, which I've been like referencing the whole time,
That scene.
that scene, the scene where the one girl is on the table and we have this very quiet,
Out of
very long
focus.
shots
Oh,
of
yes. Yeah.
her face being pulled up. I mean, I was gooped, I was gagged, I was throwing up, vomiting, crying, screaming. That was tough because I
It's
think in a lot of
tough.
horror, there's a lot of like modern horror, there's a lot
Mhm.
of shaky handheld cameras,
Yeah.
fast shots to like
Yeah.
make you feel the anxiety and
Mhm.
whatever. But to actually spend time on those images,
Mhm.
on even just the close-ups of their faces and the
Yeah.
beads of sweat,
Yeah.
it just made it was such a unique use of like being made to feel unsettled.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
really felt like you were in that, like, I'm getting sweaty talking about
Yes.
it, man.
Yes. Yeah.
So I loved the pace of this film for that. So I think
Mhm.
in that way it made me just, between the morals and those very perfect shots, I felt
Yes.
just a little like,
Like
oh
unsettled.
yeah.
Yeah.
And again, that's when I was
It's
eating my dinner. So
might you say it's
oh no.
uncanny?
Oh gosh, there we go. Da, 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 da. Very uncanny, Sienna.
So I'm teeing up my film theory corner here,
God, I'm
but
so sorry I didn't tee you up for that. That
no,
was
no,
like the
no.
one word I didn't use.
That's well, because part of as I say that I was like, Sienna, why are you so scared of waxworks? I was like, want to find another film to pair this with, that to pair House of Wax with, that will let me talk about Sigmund Freud's essay, The Uncanny.
Oh,
Um,
this is like my favorite. I love that you come to this podcast with those things. That's my favorite part.
I'm so glad
I
because
don't like researching these things personally
this is
myself, but I love when other people talk about
oh my
them.
god, this is
I don't want to read.
I, I'm a
I don't wanna read
nerd.
these
This
things.
is I'm like desperate for opportunities to
Oh, I
tell.
love it.
I got something you may or may not know about me. I don't know if I've mentioned this, but when I was in college, I got like I went on like a Freud kick where not that I think he's like accurate, but I think he's interesting.
There's yeah,
Um
I think with any, we've learned over the last 3
yes.
episodes, like, with all theory or
Mhm.
theorists, like, pick the
Yes.
things that make sense for you.
There are going to be things that work and things that don't about
I
anybody.
don't think anyone's fully nailed the
Yes.
thing,
Yeah.
so yeah.
With that said, Freud is probably second only to Linda Williams and her body genres in
Mm,
terms of ones that I actually buy into. I
okay.
think his theory of the uncanny is like totally on the nose.
Yeah.
And I think that is, as we talk about different kinds of horror, I picked this to go with House of Wax because I was like, I think my fear of waxworks is a fear of the uncanny.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about uncanny horror.
Yeah, 'cause yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, 1960, directed by Georges Franju, stars Pierre Brasseur and
God.
Alida Valli.
Love it. You're doing great.
And tells the story of the brilliant and deranged Dr. Genessier, who, after a car crash, horrifically disfigures his beloved daughter Christiane. He decides that he must find the face of another to give to his precious girl.
Mm,
Um,
tough, man.
it's
Guilt, a father's guilt,
well,
parents'
yeah,
guilt.
it's so much about guilt and shame too, especially her shame of her, like her sense of herself as a monster, which is so upsetting because obviously, like, honey, your dad's the monster.
Yeah.
Like, it's talking about this as a Beauty and the Beast story. She's
Mhm.
beauty,
Mhm.
but she sees herself as the beast, and
And is
that
made to kind of feel that by her parents, I think,
yeah,
too.
by everyone around her.
Yeah, it
Um,
was heartbreaking, like, all the shots of her when you would enter her room and her just
mhm.
being, like, splayed on the like,
Yes.
spread on the floor, like,
Oh,
head buried. I was just like,
yeah.
"Oh,
I
baby."
know. Oh God. Well, and there's um I'm trying to decide if I want to get into the Freud now or later, but basically, Freud's essay on the uncanny kind of turns around this one short story that's also the basis of the ballet Coppelia. And something that I always think about watching this film is it reads like a ballet. Like her movement is very
yeah.
balletic. The like so much of I used to do ballet as a kid, and so back in the day, a lot of the way ballet dancers were trained was with this like series of set gestures that signify different emotions. So, you know, you have your like hand on the head to signify distress and
All
stuff
about
like that.
those hand movements.
And there's so much of that here, and especially the way she like collapses on the
Oh my
bed with
gosh,
like these
yeah.
like very intentional hand gestures. It just like
Yeah.
it like hits that for me.
Absolutely. I see. Yeah, I absolutely see that.
And so that to me is like another part of, I think a part of the uncanniness of it too, is like she's
She
not
kinda
really moving like a
floats.
person. She's moving, like an apparition
Yeah.
almost.
Yeah, totally.
Which
Especially with like her, like I know she's wearing like a collared, like,
mhm.
but yeah, she's very like draped. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can't see her like feet move.
No, yeah, and she has this kind of like
Yeah.
yeah.
It's oh God.
Were you also a dance kid back in the day?
I did tap.
Oh,
I was a tap
that
dancer.
makes so much sense.
Yeah.
I did a little bit of tap.
Yeah,
but
Can
this-
you tell by
this
just my like
tracks.
loosey
Yeah.
goosey?
Which of us is the tap
Yeah.
dancer?
Yeah. Look at how we're. If you're watching this, like, look at how we're both sitting. I'm just like fucking hang out of frame because I'm just like slouching over here, and Siena's like poised. It never leaves you. I did 1 year ballet, cried.
Oh yeah. Oh, it is
Then my mom was like,
incredibly
"Tap."
abusive. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a terrible environment for kids.
hated it.
But one of the things that they tell you is like always imagine that you are a marionette and
Hold by a
there's
string on the top of your
string
head.
coming from the top of your head, and she moves around like that the entire time.
Yeah, her movements are beautiful. Again, just one of the many beautiful things about this film.
So, director Franju, this is the film that he's most famous for. His background is actually in doc filmmaking. This, I think, was his first narrative feature. His most famous piece up to this point was a documentary called "The Blood of the Beasts."
Love that.
Right? Which was a graphic view inside a Parisian slaughterhouse.
Oh, cool.
And he refers to that and two of his other docs from that period, or might be three, as his slaughter films. The other one, there was one about industrial factories and one about post-World War II veteran hospitals. And so
he
it's like,
kind of has that, and he like able to capture these things in a
exactly.
That totally makes sense.
It makes
then.
perfect sense, but it's also so fascinating to think it's like, here's somebody who sees himself as coming from a very different filmmaking tradition, and yet it's like he was basically doing nonfiction horror.
Yeah.
Which, like,
totally.
You don't really think about that being a thing.
Yeah. I
but
love
is.
that. How fascinating.
Right? And horror in general hadn't really hit France at this point in the same way that it had in the US.
I was wondering what time it.
What the horror background
'cause
was.
I was like, damn, this is early for
Tell me your
French
guess. What were you thinking?
when would it? You said it hadn't really come around.
It hadn't really hit in the same way.
This was 60.
Mm-hmm.
God, I have no idea with France. I don't really know their.
It's interesting,
horror.
right? Well,
It's like naturally I want to say 70. So I'm like, that's kind of when it became like a bigger thing in the States.
Yeah,
though,
that's
but
when
I
we
don't
got
know.
really into horror. But
Yeah.
basically, up until this point in France, there had been a film called Diabolique in 1955, which is another one I've got on our list for some point.
Cool.
It was a main reference point for Hitchcock for a lot of his films.
Okay. Yeah.
But even though arguably the first horror film ever produced was produced in France, which is, we're going to get real nerdy here, Georges Méliès's 1896 short, The Haunted Castle. So Méliès, famously one of the two kind of main pioneers of filmmaking in France at the time, was him and the Lumiere brothers, and there's kind of this like dichotomy.
The Lumiere brothers, of course.
And there's like a dichotomy between the two of them, with the Lumieres being more like non-fiction documentaries showing real life, and Méliès being all about fantasy, and he's the one who did A Trip to the Moon.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's that guy.
Oh, there we go.
He made a short in 1896, basically 1 year after the like accepted date for when the camera was invented. Wow. So right at the very beginning, which is basically It's, he loved doing in-camera special effects where he would
Yeah.
like stop the filming and then start it again and something would disappear and stuff like that. So it's
Totally.
basically a haunted mansion type of story with
Yeah.
him having like spooky skeletons and stuff pop out
That's
at
so
him.
cool.
So basically the first horror film made in France in
Very cool.
1896. But there's kind of this like not blank period necessarily, but this sort of dormancy of French horror. This is kind of one of the first straight horror films from France to reach a mass audience.
Mm.
And then now, of course, there's a whole genre called the New French Extremity,
Yeah.
which is, films like Martyrs, Them, High Tension, Titan, Climax. Like, there's so many films coming out of France that we think of as kind of um, this like pioneer in this specific brand of disturbing like body horror, all about like the transformation of the body. And thinking about that, I can't help but think that a lot of it stems back to this movie.
Totally. I
Because
also think just the French and just Europe as a whole has such a different view on bodies in the way that like American horror or other places don't have the
Totally.
commentary. They're just so much more comfortable with that
Yeah.
I think they view bodies in a different way.
They're
So
totally.
their horror films are
It makes sense that they'd be
yeah,
pushing things maybe a little bit further than we are in the
totally.
States. But basically, yeah, I think we kind of maybe don't get films like Martyrs without Eyes Without a Face. Although, fun side note on Diabolique, since I mentioned it, the writing team behind the script for this film, which is Pierre Boileau and Thomas Narcejac,
That sounds right.
also penned the original novel Les Diaboliques, and From Among the Dead, which is the book that Hitchcock went on to adapt as Vertigo.
Oh.
So they are responsible for Diabolique for this film and for Vertigo,
Wow.
basically. So you can really see French horror is a big touch point for Hitchcock.
Yeah.
And I think you can see that in
Yeah,
the film,
totally.
right?
Yeah.
So speaking of the script, based on a novel by a man called Jean Cocteau, about whom there seems to be literally zero on the internet in
Oh, no.
English.
Oh
It
no.
may or may not be the pen name of another author. I went down a
Oh.
deep, dark hole trying to find out more about that. Certainly the most famous piece released under this author's name. It is deeply out of print. I
Oh
tried to
gosh.
find it. You can't even find a French edition online, let alone an
Wild.
English
Oh,
one.
damn.
And believe me, I tried.
Yeah.
Generally, those who have found and read copies of the original seem to kind of regard it as pretty trashy and not great,
Oh, no.
which is kind of fascinating given how high art the film adaptation
Yeah,
is.
but you gotta think like with any kind of inspiration, it just takes that one little seed, that one little nugget, that one little piece,
Totally.
and then it just like makes. So it's really a testament to people who adapt things from. It's like what the fact that their brains are able to
Exactly.
kind of take it and see the high art in that concept
Yes.
is really cool.
Yeah. Well, and part of that goes to concerns about censorship, which we'll get into later on. But I have a themes and approach section here. So Franjou himself never wanted to call this a horror film. And kind of insisted on that over and over again, saying instead, and obviously this quote is translated from French, this
Yeah,
isn't
so
the
take it
original,
as, yeah.
but basically said it's about anguish. It's a quieter mood than horror, more internal, more penetrating. It's horror in homeopathic doses, which like
I mean, nailed it.
whew.
That's I think even what I was like, that's how I feel
Exactly.
about it. So
Yeah.
nailed it.
Yeah.
First off.
Yeah, horror in homeopathic doses. Though, like what a
Yeah.
great phrase.
Yeah,
Ugh.
it's really good.
Chef's
yeah.
kiss.
It probably sounded way more elegant in French too.
Oh, I'm sure.
Sounds great in English though. No, I totally, again, but that's the thing. Like, I think people try so hard. Like, they feel like if they call something horror, then that negates the art to
Right,
it or the
which
themes or the whatever. And I'm like, they
it
both can exist at the
doesn't.
same time.
Yeah.
Which this film proves.
Absolutely does.
It can do.
Yeah, it's absolutely an art film,
yeah.
absolutely a
Oh,
horror film.
yeah.
Like it's
Yeah, it is
100%
both.
both of those things. And those things aren't fighting or in opposition to each other, I don't think. I think the horror supports the artfulness and vice versa. a little bit about the cast and crew. Pierre Brasseur, who's the doctor, also plays a doctor in, okay, this wasn't his narrative debut, but he played a doctor in Franju's previous film, his narrative debut, which is called Head Against the Wall. And Edith Scobb, who's the daughter Christiane, also had a role in that previous film. So he's kind of working with the same cast and crew making this guy play evil doctors over and over again.
I mean, he does a great job.
He's really, really terrifying.
You kind of like it. He feels like trustworthy.
He feels
but then you're like, ugh.
to me. He feels like I feel
sorry
for him. He's so desperate.
And again, with that desperation comes the tunnel vision, which is what comes like these moral like gray areas. You know? So
well, and it's like not only is he desperate, it's like he really wants to atone. He really wants to make right for the wrong he's done. And in the course of doing that, does so much more wrong, which is also like a very human thing.
Totally.
Right? And so I think
grief and like we said, those human emotions can pull you in a direction of wrong and bad.
And so it's
very easily.
This almost feels to me like a horror film where there's no villain. Like there's nobody. I feel compassion for everybody. In this film. He's definitely the closest. He's definitely the antagonist. But I don't hate him.
All of it's like awful.
All of it's awful. It's all sad.
Yeah, it's all sad. All awful.
Welcome to all of my movie recommendations. It's all sad. So basically, here's the potential censorship they were trying to avoid that I hinted at. This was a film that they knew going in they were going to have to write to avoid the censors, particularly because, you know, part of what's difficult about filmmaking in Europe, particularly at this time period, is you're thinking about the censorship of so many different countries all at once. You're not just thinking about, like, what are the US ratings going to do?
Right.
So the producer told the director that too much blood would upset the French censors.
Okay. Animal
torture would upset the English censors.
Yeah, fair.
And mad scientist tropes would upset the Germans, which is hilarious to me. That would be the thing that Germany would get upset about. Like,
I mean,
perhaps something's hitting a little too close to home.
Yeah. Wow. That's funny though, because you don't think about having to think about all of those countries.
And like this film has all three of those things in spades.
Yeah.
And the source material had all three of those things in spades. And so to work around those issues, the writing team really leaned into the character of Christiane, whereas the original apparently is much more focused on the doctor and his perspective.
Glad they changed that, to be fair.
Right?
She's so much more fascinating.
So much more interesting, and I think also makes it much more horrifying, particularly because I think it's kind of playing in a way I imagine Carol Clover would have some things to say about. Fucking Carol. With kind of the horror trope of placing the viewer in identification with the monster, you know, because she's seeing herself as the monster and we are seeing through her eyes. There's like a little bit of a twist on that going on, I feel like. This film was released in the US in a dubbed and heavily edited version under the incredibly schlocky title The Horror Chamber of Dr. Faustus.
Oh my god.
Which is amazing because there's no character named Dr. Faustus in the movie. They just pulled that from nowhere, from Faust.
Just
presumably.
Someone was like, I edited this, so it's my film now.
I've decided that this is Faustus.
Whoa.
And it was usually played as a double feature with a Japanese shot, American produced sci-fi film called The Manster.
The Manster! To be fair.
I need to see this movie now.
I think that might...
I'm obsessed.
Is it just about men being monsters?
Seemingly. The Manster.
The Mansters. Oh my god.
Isn't that amazing?
I hate that word.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest. It doesn't. Great.
Yeah. Deeply curious about that. Yeah. I feel like we need to go watch The Manster.
Weird.
Now.
Okay.
And that version removed a lot of the heterografting scenes, which is the really...
Is that the scene that made me sick?
Yeah, that's the scene that made you sick. And also, fascinatingly, the other thing that they censored in the American version...
The dogs.
No. They took out the tender moment that the doctor has caring for a child at his clinic. they decide, which
Oh.
is like so telling about American censorship to me. It's like, oh, we can't have him be such a morally complex figure.
Yeah.
We need to
It
have
needs
him
to be
be
the
more
bad guy.
clearly a bad guy. Um, Fascinating. Thanks,
Yeah.
America.
Yeah. We
Um,
care more about the animals than human
yes.
compassion.
Yeah,
Totally
no.
checks out.
We need it to be more morally black and white for
Yeah.
the American release, which yeah.
Because we're not good at that.
No, we are
Oh, God.
not.
Checks out.
Shocking, I know. This film did not receive great press when it was released, which like
I
although
just feel like it should have.
it should have.
Every
It's
shot in this is
incredible.
I just want to like have that burned into my eyeballs.
It's
Every
a
single,
masterpiece.
even just like there's a shot of like just the car driving down. I'm like, I would
Yeah.
have posted that on my Tumblr in 2011. You know?
100%. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah,
It's
that
good.
the opening shot with the title and the curving tree branches against the black night sky.
So good.
Ugh,
Yeah,
I
there's so
love
many good
it.
shots.
So basically, reviewers were disappointed seeing this lofty documentary filmmaker deigning to dip a toe into the genre pool, which just like get over yourselves. Like horror
Oh,
is not
man.
less important than
Yeah.
documentary. Also, like he was making documentaries about slaughterhouses. You
I'll
shouldn't
just-
have been surprised.
Yeah, just let him do what he wants, man.
Let him do what he wants.
Damn.
A lot of people called it a ripoff of German Expressionism, which I frankly don't really see at all. I love German Expressionism.
Yeah.
Love Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Have
Yeah.
Cabinet of Dr. Caligari pillows on my couch at
Oh
home.
my God, you would. Yeah.
Of course I
Yeah.
do. But to me, this film feels much more like a French New Wave film. Like it's
Yeah.
much more
I
yeah.
get it, but
I think
people also are always just trying to pull for the thing.
yeah. I'm curious if you feel the same way, but I was thinking about like why doesn't it feel like that to me? And like to me, German expressionism feels very like emotionally hot, like very I don't know, close to the emotional surface, whereas this feels like it's got a very cold, detached approach from the horrors it's depicting.
Yeah, totally.
Like it just the camera, like you said, just kind of sits there and watches.
Again, that's it. When you said that he was a documentary filmmaker, every shot flashed before my eyes. Of like that makes so much
It
sense
makes
that it just
perfect
held on
sense.
these things and like let the story like unfold in front of them
Yes,
versus trying to like capture or create or whatever a moment. It just felt like the moments like came to the camera instead. So yeah, I would. Yeah.
Which reminds me of I'm just gonna put a plug in here for a experimental horror doc that I really love.
Go on.
There's Stan Brakhage, who made the film Mothlight that you probably had to watch in film school. It's basically just moths being run through a projector. It's really cool.
Oh.
He made a documentary of an autopsy being performed that is shot very similarly to this.
I did take a nonfiction and film like class, which was
Might
a
have
lot
showed
of
this.
that, and
Yeah.
that sounds we
Yeah.
watched some weird shit in that class.
Yeah.
I loved it, but I was like, what the fuck?
So if you're looking for more horrors on a medical table watched by like a distanced camera, go check out that as well. But one reviewer, actually one of the very few reviewers who admitted that she liked the film, almost was fired over admitting she liked it at the time.
Rude.
But as we've seen with so many of these horror films that got initial negative reviews, there's this kind of odd undertone of grudging admiration that you can kind of sense bubbling up.
Yeah.
Like England's Monthly Film Bulletin wrote that the film's haunting camera work allies itself perfectly to Maurice Jarre's obsessive score, but then backtracks to say that the actors were sadly wasted and can do nothing with almost non-existent characters. And it's like, I feel like I think the lady doth protest too much. Like you are so much more articulate about the things you like. And that to me is the sign of a critic who's fighting their own reaction to the film.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Franju did get to live to see the film kind of be reappreciated, though. It screened as part of the Cinémathèque Française 50th anniversary in '86, which was this French film archive that Franju was a co-founder of. They screened it as this anniversary screening. People were calling it a marvel. And now a lot of modern reviewers note its ties to Jean Cocteau,
Funny.
which I think is a much better comparison than German
Yeah.
Expressionism. That's much more to me what it feels
Yeah,
like
it's
it's
a lot more of
referencing
art.
is like French poetic cinema. This
Yeah.
is France from like not that long after
Yeah.
Jean Cocteau made his famous trilogy. David Edelstein for Slate actually wrote in a modern review that the storyline is your standard obsessed mad doctor saga, one step above a poverty row Bela Lugosi feature, but it's Lugosi by way of Cocteau and Ionesco, which I was like,
Wow, that is a layered
"Ooh."
review, but-
right? Right?
Thankfully, I get most of that.
I get some of what he's saying there.
There's some references I definitely don't get.
Yep.
So everyone listening, don't feel bad.
That's fine.
You're
Yeah.
not alone.
No.
But yeah, no, I get the aspect. The aspects I get.
That's all we can ever hope for, right? So nowadays, a 2010's Time Out poll of horror filmmakers and actors placed Eyes Without a Face at number 34 out of their top 100 horror films of all time.
Yeah, it's
So
good,
it's a
man.
horror film beloved by horror filmmakers, which I think
That's
is
so great.
very telling. And it was a huge influence on other directors. I think partially because it's so damn pretty.
It is.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
So Jesus Franco has openly cited as a reference for a lot of his horror movies. The Awful Dr. Orloff, which is one of my mom's favorites. Faceless. If you've seen Almodovar's film, The Skin I Live In, it's very, very, very much in conversation with Eyes Without a Face. Even John Woo cited it as an influence on Face Off.
No way.
Yeah, which like
That's so funny.
of course it is.
I always it's so funny with creating art and putting it out into the world. It's like maybe it just wasn't your time.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
But like look at how much.
Look
wow.
and obviously Billy Idol song named after the film. It actually the chorus, there's like a little bit where he's kind of going like
He says
and
it French.
yes,
Yeah.
he's singing Les Yeux Sans Visage, which is the French
Yep.
title. But okay, I saved my favorite reference story for last.
Ooh.
Comes from John Carpenter. If you
okay.
think that the featureless mask from this film looks familiar from a certain Mr. Michael Myers, you're not wrong. Carpenter stated in an interview about the film, and this is a quote, "We didn't have any money to make a mask. It was originally written the way you see it. In other words, it's a pale mask with human features, almost featureless. I don't know why I wrote that down, why Deborah Hill, the designer, and I decided on that. Maybe it was because of an old movie called Eyes Without a Face."
Aw.
So we would not have Michael Myers'
That's so funny.
iconic mask without this movie.
Because I feel like the story that always gets told about the mask is like Kirk from Star Trek. It's
Yes.
like his
Yeah.
like but you know, where did they even get the idea
Get
for
that
that
from?
of
Yeah.
like what they wanted?
Yeah.
I
So
love it.
it's even Carpenter. I also I watched this on the Criterion channel, and they have a whole bunch of they do interviews with other filmmakers talking about
Yeah.
films. There's an adorable Guillermo del Toro segment on Eyes Without a Face. I love him so much.
Cute man.
He's so good. And he basically, I think he does such a great job of talking about this film, and it makes perfect sense because this is so. I think it hits on a lot of the same buttons that something like Pan's Labyrinth does in terms of the combination of beauty and horror. He said that at the same time that Franju is willing to kind of go for all the gore, he also captures what Del Toro describes as this feminine, poetic, tragic essence, like an undead Audrey Hepburn.
Oh.
Which, like,
the
right?
whole time I felt like it was like an Audrey Hepburn.
Yes.
Like just again the physicality, the daintiness. I think just like from the inside out,
balletic, yeah.
the feminine femininity in her character, the
Totally.
softness, but also
Yes.
like just her
There's,
like
like, a fragility.
inquisitiveness.
Yes,
And
yeah.
like she is so strong because like I can't even imagine going with
Oh my
like
God,
through what
yeah.
she was going through. So to
Yeah.
be so solid in that too, like, but I also don't think like femininity also is strong. So
Right.
I just let me make that clear too. Like those aren't different things. Those
Right.
are very much the same
We are
thing.
two femmes talking about this, after
So
all.
like, but yeah, totally.
And
Ugh.
so he talks about the contrast of beauty and brutality and says, at the center of all the horror are immense acts of love. Which
Yeah.
I love that.
I mean, the whole thing, we talked about this, the whole thing stems from just,
love.
love.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
within that, I mean, just think of
Think of the horrors we commit for love.
what's this show on TLC that's like the women who murder or whatever, and it's like the
Women who kill, I
yeah,
think, something like that. Yeah.
like the people married and then just like so like that exists.
There's that.
But yeah,
Yeah. So I just loved that. He also even
love that he loved it.
right? And he even does like a little intentional homage to it in Chronos that he's talked about, where he says basically the scene where a character calls home and can't speak on the other end is a direct Eyes Without a Face reference. Which just love.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, this brings us to my film theory rant corner.
Freud.
Sigmund Freud. So in a very me move, I've taken us to one of my favorite places in horror film theory, of course, is from A, a time before sound film was even invented, and B, who I describe as the podcast friend of the podcast, Siggy Freud, in my notes. Siggy Freud. So I first read this essay in one of the best classes I ever took. It was called Through a Glass Darkly, Gothic and German Romantic Tales of Horror. Great class.
Yeah, no shit.
Went on to become my entire personality.
Yep. Still hasn't left you.
Yes, hasn't left yet. Thanks, Professor Bernofsky. It was taught by the person who did the most recent translation of Kafka's Metamorphosis, which should tell you something about the tone.
Yeah.
So basically, in 1919, probably after consuming massive amounts of coke, knowing Freud, he sits down and writes an essay called The Uncanny in English, which itself, I'm sorry, we're going to get so nerdy here, guys. Bear with me.
Do it.
That title is a translation of the German term unheimlich, which is doesn't quite mean the same thing as uncanny. It's kind of frustratingly untranslatable because heimlich in German means kind of like comfy hominess, like around the hearth.
Okay.
And so unheimlich is this idea if
the opposite of that?
It's like something that feels familiar but isn't.
Yeah. That's a hard thing to translate.
It's a hard thing to translate. And so the way I like described it in my notes is like if warm fire in the fireplace is heimlich, then like that creepy picture in your grandpa's house with eyes that seem to follow you is unheimlich.
Yeah. Totally.
So it's that feeling.
Yeah.
And that's basically what he spends the entire essay trying to define. That's what I think both of these films tap into. And he uses a story called The Sandman by an author named E.T.A. Hoffman to kind of pull out what are the things that make something uncanny. That story's, like I said, the basis of the ballet Coppelia. It's basically a kind of Pinocchio-esque narrative about a mad scientist, an automaton doll brought to life, and a horrible folklore figure who steals human eyes. Which, like, all of these things, very applicable to both of these films, right?
I wonder if that's where Jeepers Creepers came from.
I have not seen it. Is there somebody who steals eyes?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's gotta
There's
be
like
a Sandman.
like a little, yeah.
That's gotta be
I'm pretty sure. We'll cover it and then we'll find out that
yeah,
way.
there we go. And then maybe I'll make you read The Sandman.
Yeah.
So he goes on to kind of pick apart different elements of that short story to find what are the things here that are uncanny. And some of the things that he cites are the loss of one's eyes. That's something that he thinks of as a particular uncanny fear, which being Freud, he goes into this whole thing about how the eyes are an emotional metaphor for balls, and so you're actually afraid of castration.
Okay, so that's when I like leave him. But I think that's like where
that's when the coke kicked in.
yeah, that's what but like eyes are like the windows to the soul.
Yes,
so like if you don't have like I can get
absolutely.
where that comes
I
from.
think
he should just stop.
Just quit while he's ahead. That's like the classic Freud thing.
I know.
It's like
he loves to just go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, he just always going back to your Big Ben
goes down the
clock
holes.
joke.
He would probably say something about me saying
God
that.
damn
So.
it. God damn it. Through the train tunnel. Anyway. So losing eyes, doubles and doppelgangers. That's another big thing.
There's a whole trend on TikTok too. Actually, Mike
Ooh.
Flanagan has been like reposting some people's,
Of course
and
he would
there's this
be.
audio that goes with it. It's like an 8-second audio of like, if you see someone knocking at your door that looks like you, like make sure to not let them in. And it's like this like creepy noise, and then people just like looking, and then there's someone in the window, and it's the same. Like it would be, me doing it, and then all of a sudden I'm in the window with like, and people just put really creepy makeup on where it looks like them but not. That trend. Don't watch it at night. It gets me every time.
We
People
should
make
do one.
good stuff. We should.
So kind of the most central concept that he talks about in terms of the uncanny, and the one that I really wanted to dive into with these films, is the idea of something that appears human but is not. Something that, and there's that like something that feels familiar but isn't. The unheimlich.
Love that.
And so I pulled a quote. This is a bit of the essay where Freud is quoting another author named Jentsch, who is sort of the first guy. Thanks, Jentsch.
I love that. I love that name.
Right? He's sort of the first guy who starts talking about the uncanny. He's the one who got Freud onto the idea. This part of the essay, Freud is basically splitting hairs with Jentsch over whether missing eyes or not human lookalikes are the scarier, more uncanny thing.
Okay.
Which I think is not the important part.
Yeah. Like you guys both are saying the same thing.
You're 100% in agreement. Let's move on. But I thought this was the most useful kind of quote to summarize it that I could find to pull. In telling a story, one of the most successful devices for easily creating uncanny effects is to leave the reader in uncertainty whether a particular figure in the story is a human being or an automaton, and to do it in such a way that his attention, the reader's attention, is not focused directly upon his uncertainty, so that he may not be led to go into the matter and clear it up immediately. So the idea is to really make something creepy in an uncanny way. You have to kind of plant the seed of the idea that this thing may not actually be human, but in such a way that is so subconscious that the person's not really thinking about that.
Yeah, just something. It's like the vibes.
Yeah.
You just feel something's
Yeah.
off. Yeah.
That like, which I think is both of these films are so about that.
Yeah.
About this idea of, for a film about waxworks, House of Wax really only has one moment where they play with, is this a wax or a real person? That's
not really the scare factor.
That's not really the scare factor, but what kind of is all of the moments in which there is something going on off screen or out of sight, out of mind, that is making you question what is real, what is wax, what is human, what is not, in ways that are not at the center of the narrative.
Yeah.
And I think if more of it were about, is that a waxwork or a person, it would be less scary, right?
It's because the prickly feeling you feel on the back of your neck, feeling that like uncanny.
The uncanny.
Does.
Yeah.
Versus like the straightforward scare of stuff. It's like there's just something, when you just feel it in your spine, when you feel it in your stomach, you're like, there's not something right here, but I don't know what it is.
I can't place what it is. And I may not even be aware of it beyond the feeling. And to me, that's the kind of horror that sticks with me the most. That
a couple of my favorite movies, I realize in this moment, are kind of that.
Do tell.
Stepford Wives and Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
1000%.
It's like there's something not right here, but they're seemingly human, and they're but there's
human but not.
Human.
But
I didn't even realize like those are two of my favorite films.
Incredibly powerful, and it's like it's something that I come back to all the time. I like find myself writing like doubles and twins and like things like that a lot in my own horror writing, and it's like, oh yeah, it's because that's the uncanny. And
well, even we've talked about this before in the podcast, but like even staring in the mirror at yourself,
it's
and
the
like
uncanny.
If you stare at your features for too long, they become just a little bit, and it's just
familiar
like
but not.
Ugh.
Even the twins in The Shining, it's the hitting on the same thing. It's so this is part of the reason I love this so much is that it completely, once you become aware of this, you start seeing the uncanny in horror much more clearly. And to me, it only makes it all the more potent.
Yeah.
And so it's like now I seek out stuff that is uncanny much more consciously, because this essay in particular, I think, does what to me is what film theory does at its best, which is gives you words for a feeling in film. It puts a term and helps you come to a conscious understanding of something that everybody's feeling but might not have the words for. And to me, that's the good stuff. Leave all your stuff about castration anxiety and balls by the wayside. That's the really interesting shit. And like, it's,
I love that.
So I felt like after ripping Carol to shreds last episode,
you had to give Frood some love.
I had to bring in somebody that I actually really like. So of course I'm bringing in Sigmund Freud.
We just left out the parts we don't like.
Yes, exactly. Which there's plenty of that. There's plenty
funny.
to hate about Frood. But and yeah, I think that's the kind of horror that I return to the most. And it's I now own, like, if you come to my house, you'll see my living room. There's like a whole shelf of just Freud books.
Oh, funny.
Yeah, I went down a whole rabbit hole there. I'm fine. Yeah.
You're doing great.
Yeah,
You're definitely mentally sound.
Don't need psychoanalysis. Just pass me the cigars.
We're horror fans.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah, just great.
Period.
Just great. There's nothing to examine there.
Not a thing.
Yeah.
Freud would have absolutely nothing to say.
Absolutely nothing to say. So you mentioned the music. This has such an amazing soundtrack, right?
Just this very like carnival, carnival-esque. I love it that like one of the recommendations after was Carnival of Souls, which I thought was really funny.
Yeah,
I was gonna say, because also for those that don't know, me and Siena, like, to create the music that you hear at the beginning and the end of the podcast, we kind of were giving. We gave little nods of things that we liked, and one of the things that we kind of liked was this, like,
Theodore was the Carnival of Souls,
and like the little tinkery. I even think like I sent the Chucky series,
you did,
and that's very like carnival-y and like tinkery would be the word, and I loved hearing that in this. I thought it was so playful, and again, it gave you that moment of the music, just giving the moment of relief.
Yes, exactly, and like counterpoint to what's going on, right?
Yeah, loved it.
Oh, it's so good. And there's basically only 2 musical themes in the whole movie. There's like a kind of honky-tonk-esque refrain, and then there's this sort of more mournful piece associated with Christian, and it basically just plays back and forth with those, which is
super effective.
Amazing.
And again, it like let you know what was going on in that moment with that music. Like, you knew it was like associated with the mom, you knew what she was doing, you knew that like after that was gonna come like the horrors of it. So loved it.
Which also question about, I can't remember if she's the mom or the just like guardian. But
I keep calling her the mom. I don't know why.
Did she also look incredibly like Emily Blunt to you? She looked so much like Emily Blunt to me.
Really?
Maybe that's just me. That's so funny. I like.
She's beautiful.
Could not unsee it after I saw it.
I have to look at her again. I did not get that. My brain doesn't see that. But yeah.
Also, this is so obviously a Frankenstein story, which
this might be where my tidbit comes in.
Ooh, well, it made me. I haven't seen Poor Things yet, but it made me think.
I want to see it so bad.
We should go see Poor Things together. I know it's not a horror movie, but I feel like it's.
Again, I think it might have horror elements.
But I suspect, even without having seen it, I suspect that Poor Things and Eyes Without a Face have a lot in common in terms of kind of a feminine twist on the Frankenstein story with a female monster.
It seems like it could have that for sure. Okay, so we are back. Sorry, the camera overheated, so we cut that, and now we're back.
Once again, we're too hot for the camera.
Too hot, yeah. Everyone was very concerned about this fact. So,
it's a hot tidbit you've got here.
It's something.
All right, so give it to me again. Your tidbit. It is
1908.
1908.
Dr. Charles Guthrie.
Right.
He performed the first dog head transplant. They attached one dog's head to another dog's neck, connecting the arteries in a way that like the blood would flow to the decapitated head and then to the recipient's head. It's so gross, man. Again, most things don't get me. This gets me. And so there was able to be blood flow in this first time for about 20 minutes. Unfortunately, as like things moved on, there was like poor puppies didn't hold up very well. But
there's like a lot more to connect than just blood vessels in the head, guys.
Well, that's why it didn't work. Like, yeah, totally correct. And that's why, unfortunately, R.I.P. pups. You're not wrong. But although that was not like obviously successful, I like how this says particularly successful. It wasn't.
Like it was somewhat
I
successful.
guess they woke up.
Wait, it woke up? The dog woke up?
Do you want to see the picture now or later?
Now.
It makes me physically ill to look at this. And this is the nicer photo. They have a photo where they're feeding them like a bowl of water and they're both drinking from it. It makes me want to cry because I'll show Warren too. It makes me want to cry because I'm just thinking of like Bean's head on Mabel's body and it makes me so sad. I literally want to cry about it right now. Anyone with dogs, I'm like... It's brutal.
I did not realize when you were describing it that you meant it had 2 dog heads on 1 dog body.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Warren, here you go. Here, camera. Blur it out, honestly. I don't know if I want to show that to people against their will. It's pretty brutal. Like, as much as I think we're giggling out of fear.
This might be the hardest you've ever made Warren laugh, that we've ever made Warren laugh. So that's something. That's nothing.
The reason I bring this up is, again, because of talking like in the 50s. So although this was not successcul, even though the pups woke up and drank some water, particularly successful, this guy, Carol, I don't have his name, Carrel, not our Carol, and Guthrie made significant contributions to the transplant field, and they kind of helped to understand vessel anastomosis. And they actually in 1912 won a Nobel Prize Award in Physiology and Medicine for their work on limb and organ transplant.
Oh my God.
And so in the 1950s, due to like their work on that, Dr. Vladimir, not going to pronounce his last name, like his predecessors started doing transplant surgeries and actually improved on the methods. So like if it wasn't for this dude, I think, hold on, they had a successful coronary bypass surgery in dogs in 1953, and 4 dogs survived more than 2 years after the surgery. So from 1908 to 1953, there was like a lot of progress made. But it's because of this dude like Frankensteining dogs together. And so when I saw the doctor in this, I was like, no.
Did you know about this beforehand?
Yes.
Oh my God.
So I watched this truly sickened in horror. So like when you ask me if it scared me, it's like not really, but like the morals of it. And then see Yeah. Again, if you guys want to look it up, you can just look up Dr. Charles Guthrie, Guthrie, 1908, like dog head transplant. I'm sure you could just probably look up dog head transplant.
That'll probably
and it
get
will
you there.
probably show up. But do be warned, if you have pups, it will make you physically ill because this little dude on the top looks so happy.
He looks happy.
And I'm just like, he's probably stressed the fuck out.
Oh my God, that poor
Like, where did my body go? And then it makes me think of Mars Attacks. And you know, when like her head goes on the Chihuahua and vice versa, that also makes me sick.
I'm done now. I can't pull it together again.
I like how I was like really excited to tell you this today.
Okay, well, to be fair, one of my notes that I took during House of Wax, when I think it's at Beau's his gas
house?
station.
Oh yeah.
No, I guess it is at the house. It's at the house. You know how he has all of the like jars of fetal pigs and stuff? I wrote down a note and I was like, it looks like my grandpa's house.
Oh my God. Looks like my house. I love specimens, man.
Well, because as you know, my grandpa was a neurosurgeon who was best friends with the guy who invented the ice pick lobotomy. Yeah. You can look up my grandpa. He's giving interviews about his friend, the ice pick lobotomy.
Yeah, I looked up interviews with him.
Yeah. He helped him out on them, apparently. So thanks for that, Zadie.
Yeah.
But he kept a lot of jarred pigs, sheeps, human brains, just on shelves in the garage. And I just remember going out there as a little kid and looking at them and being like,
you lived in a
yeah.
whorehouse.
Whorehouse. Yeah. When I turned 8 years old, he took down a box
What's this, Grandpa? Ah, that's a liver.
No. He took down a box of real human bones from the garage when I turned 8 and like sat me and my cousins down and was like, he was a very serious man. He was like, children, it's time for you to learn about anatomy now. And just like takes a human skull out of the thing.
You know who's getting human teeth here in town? The Crow's Nest.
Yes, we love The Crow's Nest.
Yeah,
Shout out to The Crow's Nest. Yeah.
She's getting they're getting human teeth. So sorry, just in case you wanted
So
to
if you need to
revisit.
treat yourself.
That's so funny. Oh my God, I would have loved that.
Yeah, you and my grandpa would have gotten along.
I was digging up bones. I had a field, like a little like dirt field next to me. I have like so many bones, like squirrel bones from
same.
there.
Yeah.
I love finding bones. I have a shelf of just bones I've found.
Love.
Yeah.
Everybody needs a good bone collection.
Yeah. I have my own teeth.
No.
I have my dog's teeth.
Yep. Kept all my teeth.
Anyone else's teeth, if you want to give them to me, I'm here.
We're
We'll set up a
taking
P.O.
teeth.
box. I will take your teeth. I will give them a good home. It won't be your mouth anymore. Mine.
So we're taking teeth from mouths at this point.
I mean, if they want to give them to me, I'll take them.
We will accept them. So that's great.
Anyways,
great.
so yeah, moving on. I want you to
Moving
wrap
along
up
from
what
both
your
of our
thoughts
childhood
are.
trauma and
Yeah.
Freud and my grandpa and his lobotomies
And teeth and, yeah.
teeth, collecting them,
Yeah.
the jars of bones that we both own.
Yeah.
Great. Where was I going with that? I honestly have no idea.
You were we were talking about Poor Things and Frankenstein before
yeah.
I gave you my horrifying tidbit.
all that good stuff. Oh, another fun tidbit for
We say fun very lightly here on this podcast.
something that you may not know about me. I obviously went to theater school.
Oh wow, color me
know,
shocked.
Super shocking. I went to the New Mexico School for the Arts back when it first opened. My beloved teacher Charles Gamble taught us mask work, which was something I was thinking about all the time during this movie, particularly my own favorite podcast, which I need to shout out every chance I get the opportunity. Girls, Guts, and Giallo, Annie Rose Malamet. She's been doing a Patreon only bonus series on clowns recently, and so which made me think of you. But she's been talking a lot about the history of clowns, mimes, and commedia dell'arte, which is a specific kind of mask work that this teacher of mine taught us. But the other thing he taught us that upsettingly was like the thing I was best at in all of theater class, like my specialty became neutral mask work, which is basically the kind of masks that they use in this. It's like a white, or we were a poor school, so we didn't have actual masks. We just would tie a white sheet over our face, which was really terrifying. But the idea is, as actors, you want to find what your body at its most neutral looks like, so that then you can start from zero when you're working on a character instead of starting from your own idiosyncrasies. And like all of us, like our limbs are slightly different lengths. The way we move is like determined by so many different factors. And so it's like a process of unlearning all of those things to get back to like the true neutral body. And one of the things that this film reminded me of, that having that theater experience taught me at a really young age, is that there is nothing quite as creepy as neutrality. Like it is.
Well, again, there's the uncanniness, because it's
the
like that's not the
uncanniness.
human. Like humans are so emotional. We're so like constantly craving like the original, the like finding who we are. Like that's I feel like our whole lives we're trying to find out who we are.
None of us have neutral bodies. Like all of us, like I said, our limbs are different lengths. There are distinctions that make us who we are. And the idea of erasing those distinctions towards something like perfection is actually really deeply upsetting and creepy. And like the better somebody is at it, the more upsetting it is to watch almost. So of course that was the thing that I got really good at.
That's even like, not to go like too modern and too down a rabbit hole, but even just like modern day society with fillers and plastic surgery, and like there's so many people, which is so wonderful, like, you know, dissolving those things and whatever. And I think if done right, like it's great.
Do what you want to do. It's your face.
But the uncanny valley that we are hitting now, because our faces aren't meant to be these like perfect objects. And, you know, our skin is naturally going to sag and all these things. And like, but people keep filling it up. It's like we've reached
the uncanny
such
valley.
an uncanny valley these days. You know, I lived in LA for 11 years, and like it was kind of crazy just how similar everyone looks.
Yes.
And there was like
Yes.
this feeling that you'd look at people and be like, why do I know you? It's like, oh, because
Yeah.
you look like
You
every
look
other
like everyone
person.
else.
But
Well,
there's something not human about certain
yeah.
we know the ones that are overboard. That's
Yeah.
you know.
Well, and especially like as plastic surgery trends come and go, and people will like,
Oh, you put it in, you take it out, you do this.
yeah.
It's like,
And so it's like you'll see everybody's faces morphing together in these similar ways, and it's very,
yeah. I
very
think
uncanny, very
yeah.
unheimlich.
And yeah, just the horrors. Speaking of that, just the horrors of trends of like female bodies too throughout time, and like how much we've had to every 10 years shape and shift and
Yeah.
whatever. And so this just hits that on a level that I don't even know if it meant to do outright, maybe
Who
subconsciously,
knows?
but I just think like
But
that
it
tone of this too,
gets
like
that experience across.
yeah, this film just hits fucking everything. I'm so
Oh, I'm so
in love with this movie.
I'm
I
so
just,
glad.
for those of you hesitant to watch it, even if you've made it, you probably watched it hopefully first and then listen to this, or we spoiled everything,
don't
or this
think we
will
even-
intrigue you. I don't know.
I don't think we even spoiled that much. We didn't give away the ending. We didn't give away.
Which the shot and the ending, so
Oh, it's so gorgeous.
there's haunting voices in the halls. Those end shots.
It's
Yeah.
yeah.
So good. It actually reminds me of when she's like, and again, this really isn't. They like live in a house in the woods, but there's that shot of her at the end. It reminded me of the Evil Dead shot of, and I think it's Evil Dead 2.
Yes, totally.
With the girlfriend, and then she just like twirls off. She's like, bye, and
Yeah.
she like twirls off. I don't know. I
mean,
that, but I loved it because that's one of my favorite like moments in Evil Dead 2.
I think the physicality of it. There's that same like kind of
kind of
balletic-
joltiness to it, uncanny valley too.
yeah,
But
exactly.
this film kind of hits it grosses you out. I think I think there's like so many different layers of like moral horrors, and it's just like beautifully shot.
Yes, yeah, it's.
And the subtitles, and for those too, like I actually freaked out. It didn't have a subtitle option, and I have to watch every movie with subtitles.
Same.
And I was like, oh no, did Siena just send me into like the depths to watch a French film without subtitles? Like I'm gonna
just figure out what you can.
I would have just watched it and comment. Honestly, good filmmaking. I was always taught because I learned film on a Bolex camera, so we had to splice it. We learned without sound, and
Did you have to splatter it?
Sometimes I was real frustrated when I sliced myself with a fucking razor blade on accident. Yeah. But film is a visual medium, so if you can't watch it and understand what's going on, I don't think the filmmaker did.
My mentor always told me to watch films with the sound turned off.
Yeah. That they were like, if you can't communicate it without sound, then you did not do your job.
You did not
as a
do the
filmmaker.
film. Yeah. You did not do the film.
I would have hung in there and I would have gotten it because I think it was a beautiful film. I would have understood everything. So, yeah.
I'm so glad you liked it. I feel like that's a good point to wrap up.
Yeah.
Should we tell people what we're talking about next
Yes,
time? I'm really excited for this.
I'm actually
pairing.
really excited about this too. It's been a while
really
since I've
fun.
revisited. I actually don't know what year mine came out because we kind of decided this.
We decided right as we were talking, literally right before we started
very
recording.
Prepared.
Yes, yeah. I feel like we get slightly less prepared each episode.
Yeah, we gotta kind of. I feel like we have to feel it and wing it, and like whatever little beating, pulsating hearts tell us to do.
The horror spirits speak to us. We can't force them to.
Do you have the dates pulled up on your?
I do not.
Oh.
I know yours is. I want to say it's either 2006 or 2008.
Yeah, I'm doing the Orphanage.
Yes.
Yeah, it's been a hot minute since I watched it, but I love that movie.
I love that movie so much. Was first showed it in my high school Spanish class.
Oh, funny. I know. I thought you were the Orphanage is Tomas, right?
Yes.
Oh my god, me and my sister used to have a whole inside joke about Tomas. Like anytime like something like happened, we were like, "It's Tomas."
That's so funny. The uno, dos, tres, toca la pared. That part echoes in my head at night to this day.
I'm really excited to watch it.
My God,
I actually thought you were going to cover this one, so that's what I got tossed this one very happily. I'm very excited I get to watch it.
That's one that I think we both have probably watched a similar amount of times and love a similar amount.
Yeah.
And I'm going to discuss Devil's Backbone, which is Guillermo del Toro. It's one of his earlier ones, Spanish language. He obviously was one of the, I can't remember if he's a producer or an EP or both on The Orphanage, but kind of a Del Toro adjacent pairing going off of his appearance in this pod.
Yeah.
And also 2 films about scary children. That's
so funny.
Although obviously in Devil's Backbone, as in all Guillermo del Toro, is it really the children who are scary or the adult world surrounding them?
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. On that note, thank you all for listening. This has been Splice and Splatter, the film podcast presented by the Jean Cocteau Cinema, where classic horror
meets modern gore.
We're your hosts. I'm Siena.
And I'm Al.
And Al, where can you find us?
So you can find us on social media everywhere at Splice and Splatter Pod. We're on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. Maybe we'll get X at some point. I don't know about that.
I think we are getting Letterboxd this week, which you guys have been requesting. Thank you for that.
You've been asking, yes. I think we're getting Letterboxd, so you can find us on there
fist pumping
at the
in the
same.
background.
You can also watch every episode on Sundays, so the day before, on patreon.com/GRRM.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're putting every other episode on YouTube, which is at Splice and Splatter Pod.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously you can always catch us at the Jean Cocteau Cinema here in Santa Fe, New Mexico, man.
Yeah, you can.
We're hanging out.
We are.
Creeping around. We'll probably peek out a window and watch you walking up.
Yeah, like a character in The Orphanage.
Sometimes we'll just pop up in the theater too.
This has happened. We scare each other a lot during the course of the day. It happens pretty frequently.
Big thanks.
Also, send us your reviews if you like listening.
Yeah, thanks for giving us 5
keep forgetting
stars.
To ask people for that, and you guys have been doing it anyway, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate the love. So.
Yeah, keep that coming. It helps people find us.
Speaking of thanks.
Thank you to our incredible, does all of the things.
Yeah, now
producer Warren Langford.
Yeah,
he's flying solo this episode.
I know. Unfortunately, Trav will be back and be the man behind the camera. But thanks to our producer and man behind the camera today, Warren Langford.
Yes, and our absent man behind the camera, Travis Fowler.
Yeah, we'll give him a shout anyways.
The man who wasn't there.
The man not behind the camera.
Yes. And Theo Schaefer, whose music is playing over us as we speak. Thank you,
and with
Theo.
that,
We'll be right back.